July 19, 2016 meeting of the Frankfort Plant Board. We call the roll, please, the members.
Member Ludwig.
Here.
Member Green.
Here.
Member Bronski.
Present.
Member Baldwin.
Here.
Member Rosen.
Here.
5 members, all present. First item this evening is an action item. It's consider approving minutes for the June 21, 2016 board meeting.
I have a change there. On the June 21st meeting, under the discussion about giving away items, I'm not sure what number that was, but it was the discussion about Glenn Waldrop and his group having items to give away, that I was misquoted there. I was, what it has written is to give away educational items, and what I was stressing was to do educational efforts such as posters and displays and encourage discussion rather than giving away items. So it's an educational effort was what I was suggesting.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, so you wish to have that adjustment to the minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, do we have any motions on the minutes as adjusted by Anna Marie?
I move that we consider approving the minutes for the June 21st, 2016 board meeting with corrections.
I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's, minutes stand corrected as adjusted. Next item is also an action item pertaining to minutes, and this is to consider approving minutes for the June 30, 2016 special board meeting.
And I do have some improvements there also. Under the presentation on Kentucky home performance, there was a discussion and a couple points were made that no follow-up is done to ensure the desired energy efficiency goals are met, and that is not part of their program, and that was something that came out in discussion. And then also that there is no option for renters. And I've since looked into that, and about 38% of the homes here in Franklin County are rented. So that would be a significant group that's left out of their program.
Okay, anything else?
Well, that their program does include installing the solar option, it should be noted. And the other thing on cost of the program was that if someone accepted the entire efficiency program, they could have a loan at 4%. And if they just select certain parts, it's an 8% loan.
Was this a correction to the minutes or an addition to the minute you're making?
The only thing that was an addition was that I looked up that there 38% of the people are renters, but all of the rest we actually discussed in the meeting.
Okay, I have no problem with it. Do we have a motion? Anybody?
I move that we consider approving the minutes of the June 30th, 2016 special board meeting with the corrections and additions as noted.
Second?
I second it.
Discussion, if any? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. Hearing no no's, minutes stand approved as adjusted and corrected. Next item this evening is an information item only. We're not being asked to take any action. However, the subject is probably maybe the most important subject that the plant board has addressed for many, many years, and that is our decision in 2014 to, along with another number of Kentucky municipals, to give notice to Kentucky Utilities, our long-term provider of electrical power, our wholesaler to us, that we would be leaving Kentucky Utilities, and we gave a 5-year notice. So we're 2 years and 3 months into the 5-year transition period, that is before we can actually leave KU. So in the meantime, we have formed an organization, a power organization called KyMEA, of the various electric municipals have come together and done this, and we have organized with them, and this is for the purpose of joining and acquiring electrical power from a variety of sources, to get some diversity in our sources of power and to hopefully get better pricing and for several other advantages which we perceive. So this evening we have our consultants and attorneys who have consulted and advised and helped us along the way with this. So last November we had a public hearing on this subject, and all of these individuals, our consultants, attorneys, were here, and they explained it to the public what we were doing, where we were at that time. And now they're back tonight, picking up where they left off and bringing us down to date on where we stand on this extremely important project. If everything goes well, mid-year 2019, there will be a handoff from KU to KyMEA, and we will be getting our electrical power through KyMEA, as will the others of the group of Kentucky municipals. So with that, I think Vent Foster with the plant board will introduce our speakers tonight and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. Yes, as you said, on June 16, 2015, the Board approved the Interlocal Cooperation Resolution and Agreement, which authorized the establishment of KyMEA, or the Kentucky Municipal Energy Agency. And this action was taken by the Plan Board and 8 other municipals in order to realize the benefits of economies of scale, planning, purchasing, selling, and operating power supply resources. As you said, Mr. Ludwig, I will introduce each one of the consultants. If you don't mind, you can stand as we introduce you. John Painter with Infront Consulting, Fred Haddad with Infront Consulting. We've got Charlie Musson with Rubin and Hayes, and we've got Brown Thornton with NewGen Strategies and Solutions, and Tom Trauger with Spiegel and McDermott. So if you would give them their attention, and I think, John, you're going to start the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's great to be in front of you again, have an opportunity to update you and tell you where we are in the power supply planning. Our objective tonight is to just summarize for you the key provisions of the proposed all requirements power supply contract. That would be a contract between KyMEA and each of its all requirements members for the supply of all requirements power going forward starting May 1, 2019. Okay. Behind that contract will be contracts between KyMEA and various power suppliers that constitute a portfolio of resources that would be used to supply that all requirements power. There's been substantial progress made since we were last together on putting together that portfolio, identifying the most cost-effective, most flexible resources available to you, and entering into power supply agreements with 3 parties. So we're going to talk about that as well. It's important to remember, though, that each of the members, the focus is you're being asked to consider, when the time comes, entering into the all requirements power supply contract with KyMEA. That's the focus. The members of KyMEA, there's 10 members, as listed on this slide 3. 9 of those 10 members, when we use the term all requirements members, that is 9 of the 10, excluding only Owensboro at the moment. Owensboro has its own generation. It's in a different situation than all the other 9 members. So Owensboro is not considering entering into an all requirements agreement right now, but all the other 9 are, and they would act together to obtain their power supply. There's already been an introduction of the advisors, but suffice it to say, it's an interesting situation because all of us officially at the moment, our client is KyMEA, but KyMEA is the members. So we started out serving you along with the other members, and we continue to serve you just through the entity KyMEA. Just to put all this in perspective for a moment, to deliver retail power, to meet the needs of your retail customers, there's 3 areas of business. One is the power supply area. The second is transmission, getting the power from the point it's delivered to the transmission system to your distribution system. And then there's the electric distribution and customer care business. That's the business you're in. The transmission will not be changing May 1, 2019. That'll continue to be supplied by LG&E/KU. No difference in cost, no difference in reliability on the LG&E/KU system. That's not being impacted at all. So what we're focused on is the power supply component. That's a very large component in terms of cost of the total picture of supplying a retail customer. Depending on the utility, the cost of the wholesale power can be anywhere from 70 to 80% of the total that you are required to charge the retail customer to recover your cost. Now, the members, even before KyMEA was formed, and since KyMEA has been formed, in setting up KyMEA, there was a very straightforward objective, and that was we've given a notice to terminate our relationship with KU effective May 1, 2019. Let's act together in putting together the most cost-effective, reliable, environmentally responsible power supply resource plan that we can. And let's have it available so we don't skip a beat when it comes to May 1, 2019. So another way to say that is the goal has been, as compared to continuing to purchase wholesale power from KU or any other provider, you want a more affordable electric service for your customers. You want a greater say in what the power supply resource plan looks like. And that's been the goal of everyone involved in this from day one. Those goals it's not an accident that those goals can be realized through KyMEA. There's some very fundamental reasons why it should work to achieve those goals. One, there's tremendous economies of scale in power supply, in every aspect of power supply, ranging from the planning to the negotiation of contracts to the actually using power supply resources. There's benefits in being a bit larger. Even as large as Frankfort is, its load would be relatively small by itself in the realm of power supply. When you double it by including the rest of the members, essentially, you get a more, you move more in the range of having the critical mass necessary to go out into the market and attract the most cost-effective, reliable, and flexible power supply resources and options. The other significant difference that's occurring is KyMEA, just like the Frankfort Power Board, Plant Board, KyMEA will exist to make decisions that are customer focused. Other companies are, clearly they have a customer focus, but they have a competing focus in providing returns to stockholders. The sole purpose for KyMEA, the sole purpose for the Frankfort Plant Board is to provide service to the customers and to focus on their needs and to do it economically and to do it in the best way possible. There's not the same kind of a profit distribution notion that drives. Since KyMEA is formed last September, there's been two central focuses. One is developing the proposed all requirements power sales contracts that are presented to you for consideration. The second is to put together this portfolio of resources. That's been the bulk of what's been done in the last 2 months, or the last 8 or 9 months. So let's focus first on the proposed all requirements power supply contract. As we thought about the key points for you to keep in mind about that contract, one, it's an all requirements contract, meaning KyMEA is going to plan for the total load of all of the members, and KyMEA is going to be prepared to deliver all requirements service to the members. The counterparty to that are the members are going to commit under the contract to obtain that all requirements service from KyMEA. Two sides to the same coin. Second, as you think about that contract, it's a careful and very deliberate balance of individual interest and collective interest. Clearly, Frankfort is a very large part of that, a bit over 50%. So Frankfort's interests are very much that the whole organization functions effectively. And there are certain things in that contract that are intended to blend Frankfort's individual interest with the collective interest of Frankfort and the other members. The third thing to keep in mind that the contract provides a very constructive, flexible method for the members to make use of member-owned resources. And if I can talk about SEPA for a minute, it provides several options, and we're going to go into that in more detail. But in putting together the contract, there was a very definitive effort made to be sure that to the extent that members had resources or wanted to develop them in the future, they could, and it would be handled in a way by KyMEA that provided the greatest opportunity for the members to achieve the full benefit of resources that they've invested in or that they choose to invest in the future. The last point of a general overall nature is to keep in mind that it's intended to be a very long-lasting relationship. It works best, and it will work best over a long period of time as the group works together to deal with all the challenges of providing power supply. Nonetheless, there's an option in the contract that allows any member to exit on 5 years' notice if they so choose. So again, the balancing, it's an evergreen contract, but there's an option to exit if the members choose. Starting at slide 10, there's 7 key provisions of the contract reviewed. One, the notion that it's an all requirements contract. It provides for KyMEA to sell and the member to buy all requirements power supply. Second, that the charges to each member are determined under a rate schedule approved by the all requirements members as a whole and the KyMEA board. So this isn't a rate schedule imposed on the group by some other entity. It's a rate schedule that the group together decides how to structure that rate schedule and how to set the level of that rate schedule so that it meets the objectives of the organization, the cost recovery needs, and any other objectives that need to be taken into account in setting what the rates and charges are. Third point, again, the term of the contract is evergreen, but there's an effective exit option should any member want to withdraw. And the blend of the individual and collective interest is that it's very important that KyMEA plan for a period that's more than 5 years in the future. Pursuing contracts and pursuing options that are intended to be there for more than 5 years is very beneficial and will provide you opportunities that you would have to forgo if you only focused on a 5-year period. So the contract provides for the agency to plan further out than 5 years. And if a member wants to withdraw, they give a 5-year notice, and beyond that 5th year, the member may be obligated to pay a difference in cost and value of a resource that the agency had entered into for the benefit of that member and the other members. So it's a blend of those two needs and ideas. It's important to keep in mind that every decision is made by the All Requirements Project Committee of the, just a project committee of the All Requirements members, subject to approval by the full KyMEA board. Every representative in making those decisions has a vote. It's one representative, one member, one vote. But to protect the larger members, there's an option in the contract that provides for weighted voting to overturn a decision and send it back to the board for reconsideration. So decisions aren't made by weighted voting, weighted based on the size of the member, the amount of energy that the member takes through KyMEA. It's not based, you don't make decisions that way, but you can prevent decisions from being made based on weighted voting, send it back to the full board, send it back to the AR project committee, and then the committee or the board has to come up with a better solution that everyone can pass and agree to. Member resources are provided for very carefully and very productively, and we've got 3 slides on that later, so I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. There's no impact, no adverse impact on the member's ability to issue debt. To the extent the agency issues any debt, it doesn't affect the debt issuance capacity of any member. But the contract does provide the agency limited authority to issue debt. And the limitation is that it's the kind of debt needed for working capital and other kinds of normal business functions as that liquidity and working capital. If the agency wants to issue debt to fund a power supply project, then the agency would be back before the members getting approval to do so and getting participation in those contracts. The contract, the All Requirements contract, covers several other important areas: default, dispute resolution, the covenants of the parties to each other to do certain things or not do certain things, how to deal with future generation projects, and other authorities provided to or by KyMEA. For instance, in that last category, the contract allows KyMEA to act as the member's agent for certain purposes, for instance, establishing transmission service. So the members don't have to go out and do that separately. KyMEA will do that on behalf of the members because that needs to be done in connection with delivering the power supply. Now let's focus on the rates for a minute because I know that would be of significant interest. The board will establish priorities and direction in how to set the rates. One type of priority that would be that the cost of KyMEA would be equitably distributed among the members. That sounds kind of motherhood and apple pie, but that has to be part of the rate setting process. And there is a ton of precedents as to how to do that equitably and fairly, and that basically the contract calls for that process to follow that precedence, okay? Another important part of it is that the allocation of cost would be equitable relative to the way cost would be distributed through KU's formula rates that you're used to paying. The reason for that is to be sure that when this thing starts, to the extent there's a competitive advantage from, taking power from KyMEA, that it's relatively uniform among the all requirements members on a percentage basis. So you wouldn't want a situation where one member had 20% lower cost and another member had only 5% lower cost. That would be an unfair situation relative to competing with KU going forward, relative to where you've been in the past, relative to all the risk that everyone took in deciding to give notice and step away from KU. So those two priorities will drive the setting of the rates and the design of the rates. But equally as important is the need for rate adequacy and rate stability. Again, the board will want to set the rates and not change the rates any more often than they have to in terms of the base rates. The board will want to have automatic adjustment clauses to pass through variations in fuel cost, variations in other kinds of variable cost over which KyMEA doesn't have much control. Sort of like in your retail rates, you have a purchase power adjustment clause. Many of the members do, anyhow. So by having those automatic adjustment clauses, it'll allow you to set the base rates and not to constantly have to change them. Another goal will be to provide a multi-year planning horizon so that you won't go through a process of constantly, on short notice, finding out that your rates are changing, and that will facilitate the long-term planning by all the members of their own rates and their own business plans. Now, KyMEA has members that are not all requirements members. Right now, it's OMU. In the future, there may be other members of KyMEA that are not all requirements members. So the rate setting process will start with allocating the total of all of KyMEA's cost to those different groups of members. The all requirements members, including Frankfort, would be one group. OMU would be a second group right now of one. And then there might be a third group of different members that have take different kinds of service from KyMEA. So there'd be a process of allocating the total cost, and once you get the cost allocated to the all requirements group, you would then classify it as either being related to the demand, being able to serve the peak loads, or as being pertaining to serving the energy requirements of the member. And after that classification is done, you would calculate a demand rate and an energy rate, and that would be charged to the members under the rate schedule. So that would be the process of setting the rates to the all requirements members. After that process is done, every month each member will receive an all requirements power bill from KyMEA, and it'll have 4 principal charges. There'll be a couple other charges that, like there are on KU's invoices, but they're relatively small, like for delivery facilities or for power factor adjustments. They're usually very tiny or relatively small compared to the others. And none of those will change from what they have been historically or what they would have been had you continued with KU. But having gone through this process, the main components of the rate schedule will be the demand rate, the energy rate, and the fuel or purchased power adjustment clause. And those three components together are projected to be lower than if you were taking service from KU. And that's the benefit. The structure will be very similar, and that allows the distribution of the benefit to be proportionate among the members, but all of those components are now projected to be noticeably lower than had you continued taking service from KU. Let's move to talk about member resources. And again, I'll focus on SEPA for a minute because that's a member resource that all of the all requirements members have some allocation of SEPA. Okay, but the allocation isn't necessarily the same proportion of their load for every member. Some members have a greater, their allocation of SEPA relative to their load is a bit greater than other members. So it's not uniform across. They all have SEPA, but it's not proportionate, okay? So the contract provides three options for dealing with member resources. The first option is that KyMEA would enter a contract with the member to use that member resource as part of KyMEA's portfolio and to credit the member for the value that KyMEA gets from using that resource. So for instance, in Frankfort's part, it has a SEPA allocation. KyMEA would enter into a contract, a 10-year contract, for instance, to use SEPA power, Frankfort SEPA power, to meet a part of the all requirements load, and the credit that KyMEA would make on the invoices to Frankfort would equal what KyMEA saved by using SEPA instead of some other resource. So KyMEA would pass through the real value of that resource to each of the members. Okay. The second option, the member has a right to say, well, I don't want that option, but what I want is KyMEA, I've got this resource, go market it for me. Go sell it to somebody. I think you're probably aware that over the last quite some time, OMU has been serving in that role of marketing your SEPA, getting the best value they could in the power markets, and then deducting a minor administration fee and then passing those benefits on to you. Okay, that's kind of the model that you've been on for some time. That's another option. If you would like, you can say, please do that for me. Now, if you do that, you don't know what the value is going to be month to month and year to year. It's going to be based on what the market will bear, and the market is volatile. So if you choose that, over time, it may come out the same, it may come out less, it may come out better than the first option. But the one thing for sure, it's going to be more volatile. The third option is, if you don't want KyMEA to do either of those options, you can elect to market the output of your SEPA through some other avenue. Hire somebody else to market it for you. The contract provides any of those three avenues. We really think the first avenue will be very attractive to you because it will provide a very stable level of revenue and benefit for the SEPA capacity and energy. It will also mean that hydroelectric energy is being used to serve your loads here in Frankfort. And I think for those that are most interested in environmentally responsible energy sources, SEPA is one of those environmentally responsible energy sources. It comes from hydroelectric power. So it would be nice, instead of selling it somewhere else to be used, to use it right here in Frankfort, use it right here for KyMEA so that that benefit stays at home, if you will. Now, to focus on that option one benefit, and you'll consider your options a little bit more on this at a later date, but to give you a more clear example, based on the work that KyMEA has done in planning power supply, we've estimated that KyMEA knows enough about its peaking capacity costs for the next 10 years that it would be reasonable for KyMEA to commit to pay you a credit for the next 10 years at a certain rate. Okay, and this would apply to SEPA, and also one of the cities has some diesel units, Paris. It would apply to buying or using the capacity of the Paris diesels. So KyMEA would credit at a rate of $3.85 per kilowatt month for that capacity. And then SEPA actually is better than dependable capacity. It's also reserved capacity, so there's an adjustment upward for that puts that number at a little bit over $4 a kilowatt month. The contract would also specify that as the energy is used every month and every hour going into the future, that there'd be a credit computed based on the value of that energy to KyMEA. And that would be determined hourly going forward, so that you really captured the value of the energy as it's used. This graph on slide 18, if you're following in your presentation material, shows you how that would look for your SEPA. And I realize there's a lot going on this graph, so if I could take a minute to acquaint you. If you see there's a black line about halfway up the bars, or a little bit less than halfway up the bars going across, that's the projected total cost of SEPA, that black line. Right below the black line, there's a red line or a maroon line. That's this capacity credit that I spoke about, the $3.85 plus an increase to over $4 because of reserves. And you notice that capacity credit comes very close to covering the total cost of the SEPA. Okay? So that capacity credit would be expressed in this contract that Frankfort would receive that credit for 10 years. So you can make a decision about whether to continue with SEPA, knowing that you're going to get that capacity credit that covers most of the projected cost of SEPA over the next 10 years. The height of the bars is the total credit that would be afforded to the members under the proposal that we've got. So the difference between the red line and the top of those bars is the energy portion of the credit. The energy portion is going to depend on fuel prices in the future, so there's some uncertainty there. So we did a real low range projection. The height of the green bars is the low range projection. The yellow or goldish bar is the mid range projection, and the blue bar is the high range projection. But you can see that under all of those cases, the height of the bars are well above the total cost of SEPA shown by that black line. So I think if, in the recent months, you have not been getting a capacity credit for SEPA, and the energy market rates have been at historic lows. So SEPA has not been performing as well as you would like it. I'll be nice and say it that way. So this would kind of put you in a position where you could be relatively assured that you would every month see a positive result from having your SEPA capacity and energy. Okay? Another question or overview that you may want to have is, we've got this plan for power supply. What does the staffing at KyMEA need to look like to run an organization that's going to deliver this power supply to you according to this plan? Well, this slide number 19 is an initial organizational chart that would give you an idea about what that organization might look like. There's actually 4 or 5 positions that would be in the organization. The president, general manager, the administrative assistant, the portfolio ops manager, the portfolio analytics and risk control person, and the finance and accounting person. As you get into the planning, those 2 middle boxes may be collapsed into one position. Some more thinking has to go into that, okay? To the right, you would need some recurring legal counsel support because of the ongoing power supply contracting that'll be involved. That would be outsourced. You wouldn't have enough of that to warrant an internal counsel. The 2 boxes at the bottom would both be accomplished through a third-party contract. See, part of what you've got to do to deliver this power supply is you need a desk that's managing this whole process, scheduling your resources against your loads, and they're doing it 24/7. Now, you're not large enough to make it sensible and cost-effective to staff to perform that function just by yourself. So what you would do is you would contract with a much larger third party that has all the software and has the personnel and is willing to accomplish that for you. So both of those boxes are very active, ongoing. The first box of the lower, the scheduling, dispatch, and market trading, is a 24/7 operation. The other one is also a very active operation, but you'd look to third-party contractors. And that's not a novel idea. There are a lot of organizations that are using third-party contractors for that purpose because it works, very cost-effective to do it that way. So that's what the organization would look like. It's a lean organization. So you would ask me, well, under what circumstances would KyMEA be larger than that? Well, many of the joint action agencies end up supplying other services to members. The members get together and say, we need some help with this kind of service. Generally, it's referred to as member services. But that would only be done when and if there's a real need of the members and the members find it cost effective to do that. So there might be a service, say, related to one that happens in many joint action agencies, relates to efficiency programs and programs that have to do with trying to help customers reduce their consumption of electricity. Often it's less expensive to gather together and operate that program from an organization like KyMEA than to do it 10 times. So that's a place where you might choose in the future to collaborate with the others to, again, do something maybe on a little bit better scale that saves you money and maybe makes it more effective. But this is the organization that you need to run your power supply business, and it really doesn't need to be more than that. Okay? So let's move to the all requirements portfolio. We've talked about the proposed all requirements contract. So let's talk about what's been accomplished in putting together a portfolio to provide this all requirements service. And frankly, we're pleased to say a lot has been accomplished since we were last here in November. But let's review a couple key basic ideas that you need to keep in mind. This graph is a simple graph, but it conveys a lot of important ideas. The black line that's kind of the wave, if you will, that's the load. This is for a peak day, 24 hours in a peak day, say in a hot summer day in August. Okay. The load is down low at night in the first few hours of the day, and then it builds over the day, and toward the late afternoon it peaks out, and then it falls off again by midnight and gets down to that lower level. Now, this is just the peak day. Okay. When you look at all the days in a year, the variance is much more than this. In fact, that minimum load at night is usually about 25% of the peak load on the peak day. Okay, 25–30%. Okay, if you looked at the same curve for a winter day, you'd actually see a real spiked peak in the morning, right after people get up and they have this crazy habit of wanting to be warm, and getting, various forms of heat going and everything else. There's usually a spike. Then it falls off in the middle of the day, and there's usually a secondary spike in the early evening as people come home from work. Okay, so the load varies dramatically over the day and over the year. So what you need is a diversity of resource types to provide and meet that varying load, because where we stand right now, energy produced can't really be effectively stored either economically or effectively on a massive enough scale to solve the equation. Right now, for the most part, energy has to be produced right at the time that it's used. And you got to keep that in mind. So what we've got, we call this base load. You need some resources that are really efficient when you take a lot of energy over the year from them. Almost every hour of the year you're using the energy. It's sort of like if you had a plant producing widgets and you had one plant that was going to run max out all year long producing the widgets, you could spend some more money on efficiency measures in that plant to make that process as efficient as it could, because you could amortize that investment over all that widget production. Same thing with energy. Okay, that's called baseload resources. You can spend more to have capacity, production capacity that can generate energy much more efficiently over the year. Then there's an intermediate level that kind of fits somewhere between the middle. It's not going to run as all out as base load, but it's going to run a lot, maybe half the time or more. 45, 50, 55% of the time, you're going to be calling on energy from that resource. That we typically, look at as a, quote, intermediate resource. And then in your world, the blue is the way SEPA would fit. The way SEPA works is you have an entitlement to capacity and you have an entitlement to energy. You can schedule that somewhat, but you're going to want to schedule it when it's of greatest value. And you have a certain number of hours per year that you can schedule the energy, and that blue area is kind of the way it would fit in serving the load of KyMEA and Frankfort for that matter. And then the little gold area, those are resources that they don't have to be as efficient because they're not going to run that much. Okay? They're just going to run and provide energy when your load is really toward its peaks. So you spend less money on the capacity because it doesn't have to be as efficient. Okay? Now, where do renewables fit into this? Renewables generally, the main ones here, solar and wind, they're going to produce energy as available. So they kind of fit wherever the energy production falls. And you kind of wrap everything else around the use of renewable resources. For instance, if you overlaid what a solar plant would do, it would start producing in late morning a little bit, and it would build over the afternoon, but it would peak out before the load peaks. In the winter, when that big peak happens in the morning, the solar's not going to be producing anything because the sun's just coming up. Okay. Wind is just going to be variable over the day, just based on how the wind blows in the area where it's produced. So sometimes it'll be pretty consistent over the day, other times it'll be only at night, other times it'll be as a front passes through, it'll be dramatic, and then it'll fall off. That's the nature of wind. Okay. So conventional resources, we call it can be dispatched. You can decide when to produce energy based on when it's needed, and you can sort of schedule them to do it in the most efficient manner. Renewables, they produce energy when they produce energy, and you use your conventional resources to sort of wrap around them. Okay? Sort of like the hydro, we've got a certain amount of energy that you can take from it. We're going to fit it in where it gets the most value for the agency, and then we're going to wrap the resources that have greater dispatchability around it to produce the energy in the most efficient, cost-effective manner. Okay? Okay. So there's been two key objectives that have driven, and sometimes people say, well, I've had this objective and it's kind of, excuse my French, BS. There's been two very important objectives. And this first one is competitive power supply. I have spent my career since 1980, most of my career since 1980, consulting for municipal electric systems and joint action power agencies. I've done a little work for cooperatives. I've done a little work for hospitals. But fundamentally, my focus has been municipal electric systems and joint action agencies. I've dealt with agencies that are in a position where they are not competitive. I've dealt with municipal electric utilities that are not competitive. I can assure you this is a very important objective for you to realize, and it has been a major driver in our efforts to put together this power supply portfolio. It's important for you to have a competitive power supply because it's important to the people in your community that struggle to pay their electric bills. It's also important to the commercial operators and the industrial customers in your community that affect the economy in your community. If you walked in tomorrow and told your industrial customers that your costs were going to be 40% above the surrounding electric suppliers, they would immediately start focusing on, what are our options here? Should we move? Should we close the plant? Now, I'm not saying that electricity is the number one consideration in all industrials, but with every industrial customer I've met, it's a very important consideration. And it's important to you attracting new businesses to the area of all kinds. It's important to you retaining the businesses you have, and all of you know how important that is to your community to be competitive in electric power supply. Okay, and I guarantee you, I have dealt with entities in your position and KyMEA's position that are not, and it's a very difficult place to be. Very difficult. So this has been extremely important in our thinking and so much of what we've done. The second key objective is balancing renewables and conventional resources. Everyone that's worked on this would love to stand up here today and say we can deliver a portfolio that's renewables and it's competitive. We can't say that. But we do see renewables changing. We do see tremendous progress in renewables. We don't know where it's going to be. And when I first took this assignment from the group, they asked me how we would go about it. And I said, well, we plan, we don't bet. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, the one thing we all got to agree is that we don't know about the future. We all believe that renewables are going to increase dramatically. But there are other things that could affect electric use and electric supply. We don't know what environmental policies are going to be. We don't know what CO2 legislation is going to be or whether there's going to be any. You know, the one thing we can't do is get a single scenario in our mind as to what the future is going to be and then bet that the future turns out that way. What we can do is plan for you so that you can be successful under many different futures. And that's what we've tried to do. So we've tried to build a portfolio that right now, conventional resources allow you to be competitive, allow you to have a competitive advantage. We've tried to put together a portfolio that achieves that competitive advantage, but it has the flexibility to incorporate renewables like we all want to as they become available at a reasonable cost, or as they become mandated, even if it's not at a reasonable cost. You know, in some places that's occurring. So these two objectives, I think the board is probably sick and tired of hearing me talk about them, but we've emphasized this. This is what they've told us. This is what we've heard from you and every other member we've been out to speak. Prepare us for the future, make us competitive, but we're interested in seeing an even more responsible, environmentally responsible future. Prepare us for that too. And that's been a very seriously sought after goal. I would point out that the SEPA, if all the members step forward and say, use my SEPA as far as using it as part of the portfolio, that SEPA is 32.2 megawatts. That's about 10% of the capacity requirements of the agency. So 10% of the capacity requirements are met from that renewable style resource. And the energy that comes with it will meet about 4% of your energy requirements. Excuse me a minute. So day one, you've got that in your bag as far as moving in the direction of greater environmental responsibility in everybody's eyes. Also, the board has directed us to conduct a study this year to try to identify other renewable resources that could be implemented as soon as May 1, 2019. And we've committed to try to have that study done here in the next few months and reviewed with the board. And by the end of the year, hopefully the board will be able to see what the next steps need to be in that regard. So the board and the group is taking it very seriously and believing that they're heading in the right direction. So the way the portfolio has been put together, a centerpiece of the effort has been to conduct 2 RFPs, as discussed here on slide 24. One, there was an RFP issued in September 2015. Out of that RFP, there have been 3 resources identified, 2 of which are now under contract, and the 3rd of which the contract is in the process of being negotiated. One of those resources is a 10-year purchase from Big Rivers Electric Corporation, a 3-year purchase from Dynergy, and then a 10-year purchase from Henderson, a proposed combined cycle unit that would burn natural gas. Now that last one, the first 2 would start June 1, 2019. The 3rd one would start June 1, 2022, or perhaps at some later date. It's a proposed project, so they have to see a level of subscription, enough interest in the project before they can decide to go forward. The board also conducted a second RFP that was issued in April 2016, and out of that RFP came a 10-year purchase from Paducah another municipal in the area that has combustion turbines, and they've that's under contract or about to be under contract to sell 90 megawatts of capacity from their peaking type resources. So that's been the result of the RFP. Now, both RFPs, we had a very healthy, active response to both RFPs. The first one was quite a few different variations on proposals and took quite a lot of effort to get through to fully understand what was best and what the options were. The process of considering the proposals, first we performed a quantitative assessment. That's basically, we calculated the cost under each of the proposals, projected it out over the proposed term, added on whatever other cost, in addition to price, there's other costs that have to be accounted for, like wheeling from the MISO system or certain other kinds of costs, firming capacity. Some of the proposals were, we'll just sell you energy at a fixed energy price. We added on the cost of capacity that also has to be provided to calculate the total cost of those resources. So we calculated the total cost under all these proposals, and we sorted them and ranked them based on total cost. Then we performed a qualitative assessment. We looked at uncertainties, because one proposal would have a fixed capacity price for 10 years. That provides you one level of certainty about what your capacity costs are going to be. Another one would say, well, we're going to charge you based on our actual cost of service, but we'll cap it at 10% above what we project our cost to be. That's a different level of certainty. So we considered all those different factors. In fact, slide 26 gives you a list of the factors that were considered in the qualitative consideration. So we had a ranking based on cost, and then we looked at the qualitative considerations and the way the resource fit into your portfolio and the impact it had on the portfolio, and we made decisions and recommendations that took into account the overall picture of every proposal. That's how we got to the recommendation to the board that they go forward with the 4 resources that have been identified. Now, and you'll understand this a little bit better, but slide 27, a very important aspect of the 3 contracts that have been entered into, there's Big Rivers, Dynergy, and Paducah, where the contracts are either done or they're about to be done. And then Henderson, the contract negotiations will be going on through the remainder of the year, and hopefully a decision will be able to be made by the board by the end of the year on Henderson, okay? But on the 3 that have been negotiated, not only were we able to negotiate, well, a purchase of 100 megawatts, for instance, from Big Rivers, but there's flexibility to buy more from Big Rivers if that makes sense to do so. It's a 10-year contract, but there's a flexibility to extend the contract for another 10 years if it makes sense to do so. That decision doesn't have to be made until the late 2020s, okay? And for instance, in that contract, there's a formula under which you determine the capacity price that you would pay Big Rivers for that capacity. So if you get to that point and that formula produces an attractive price and you still want coal in the portfolio, then you can exercise that right to extend it. It's a right, it's not an obligation. It does not obligate KyMEA to do anything beyond the first 10 years. Okay? We were able to negotiate a similar feature in the Paducah contract. It's a 10-year contract at a very at an attractive pricing, reasonable pricing on the capacity side, very reasonable on the energy side. But again, there's an option to extend it if the agency gets out toward the end of the 2020s and it looks like the right thing to do, the agency can extend it. It's an option, not a requirement. And the beauty of that is, let's say market prices of capacity have really escalated between now and the late 2020s. You've got a hedge against that big escalation. If market prices for capacity are very soft, you don't have to exercise it. So it's a very nice place to be, a very positive place for the agency to be. So the Henderson contract is anticipated to begin in June 1, 2022, and be a 10-year contract that would take you out to 2032. And then we expect in that contract there will be some options either to acquire a share of the project or possibly to extend it beyond 10 years. Again, you want to be in a position to have a right, not an obligation, if you can do it. So the point here, we don't expect you to delve into all that part, but I'll show you why this flexibility is so important to you in a moment. This is a graph of, I'll call it the base case capacity, supply, demand balance. The darker green at the bottom is the capacity that would provide coal energy. Notice that it's a bit over 200 for the first 3 years. 100 megawatts from Big Rivers, 100 megawatts from Dynergy. Big Rivers actually comes with reserve capacity, so it actually provides a bit more than 100 megawatts of capacity value, we'll call it. Okay. Then over the long term, out through 2029, you fall back to 100 megawatts plus that reserve value of the Big Rivers purchase. Okay. The light green area is the part that would be provided from natural gas fueled resources. Okay. In the first 3 years, it would be a 90 megawatt purchase from Paducah. In the next 7 years, it would be somewhere around 100 or 150 megawatts from Henderson, plus in this particular graph 40 megawatts from Paducah. So what was negotiated with Paducah was you buy 90 in the first 3 years, and the agency has a right on 3 years' notice to reduce that amount from 90 down to as low as 30. So you can accommodate Henderson coming in and meeting some of your resource. And Henderson produces energy more efficiently, and therefore it costs less to produce a lot of energy than the Paducah CTs. They're primarily built for the peaking purpose, only to be used in peak periods. Okay. The blue area is the amount of your resource capacity that would be supplied from the SEPA hydro. That's the 32 megawatts we talked about earlier. The little the little maroon area labeled other, that's the Paris diesels, about 11 megawatts. The little gold area at the top is an open position that we've just based on projections of market prices at this point. That's to absorb some load forecast error, and you fill that in if you need it as you get closer to the date of needing it. Okay. So let's say that we go forward for a couple years and the whole pictures with regard to renewables has changed significantly, and there's some real options to bring in a lot of renewable energy starting in the mid-2025 range, or 2022, 2023, then that will affect how much capacity you choose to buy from the Henderson project. It may affect the amount of capacity and energy you buy from Paducah. Depending on the renewable, it may have very little capacity value, but only provide energy. but it still could impact the mix of capacity that you want to have on the system. And the agency board would take that into account in making decisions. I mentioned that Henderson is a proposed project. We have no guarantee today that it will actually go forward and be built. We think there's a good chance of that happening, but there's no guarantee that it'll happen. So if it didn't, there are other options that you could put in its place. One of them is you could buy a bit more from Big Rivers for part of that period or all of that period, and you could not lower the purchase from Paducah as much as we have planned in this base case. Okay. So the flexibility in the contracts that are built into these contracts as to how much capacity you actually take, that the agency takes, is very important to having the flexibility to adapt to future circumstances. The other aspect of flexibility in the contracts is the ability to schedule the amount of energy that you want. Okay. The Big Rivers contract, the Dynegy contract, and the Paducah contract allow the agency to schedule the amount of energy they want at any time from those resources. So if there is a large opportunity to bring in renewable energy, the agency has the flexibility to bring it in and schedule less, say from Big Rivers, or less from Henderson, or less from Paducah, or less purchases from the market, okay, to accommodate that renewable energy. So the flexibility is twofold. It's you have some rights under the contract to adjust the amount of capacity up or down. You have some rights under, that's the Paducah and the Big Rivers contract. You have some rights in the first 3 years to adjust the amount of capacity up or down or on Dynegy. You have some rights to extend Paducah and Big Rivers beyond the first 10 years. And in the case of all three contracts, and you will have the right under the Henderson contract, you'll be able to schedule the amount of energy that it makes sense to take, sense from an economic standpoint, to take from those resources. So it's the kind of flexibility you need to adapt to future circumstances. So the portfolio that's been put together, it provides a lot of flexibility to adapt, and that's a watchword. That's something that's very important to the agency. With the net effect, you can adapt it to variances, uncertainties where things might come out different. You know, if Henderson doesn't happen, there's options to deal with it. If the members' loads turn out being lower because of tremendous efficiency advances, maybe the loads turn out being lower, you can adapt to that lower load level. Okay. If you get some very nice growth that's unanticipated in the way of industrial growth, you can easily adapt to having a higher load level. Okay. It's possible that OMU, right now, OMU intends to operate Elmer Smith probably through roughly 2029. But it's possible that they'll decide at some point to retire it earlier than that. And if they do, the portfolio can be adjusted to supply all requirement service to OMU as well. Some of these contract flexibilities can be used to scale up purchases if it makes sense to do so. So, you know, we're very pleased. Slide 30 tries to give you a picture of the competitive advantage offered by this portfolio relative to KU under one scenario. Now, in doing all this planning, we have looked at multiple scenarios involving different fuel prices, a lot of different uncertainties. CO2 legislation would make a very big difference in the appearance of that chart, okay, for instance. But so we've picked one here to give you an illustration of the competitive advantage that the portfolio would offer. Now, the way you interpret this graph, the shaded area is the projected cost of KU out in the 2020s. The blue shaded area is the projection of KU's demand rate. And you'll notice that that demand rate's been going up a lot over the last few years, and it's projected to go up a lot more over the next few years. But it's projected to be fairly level in the 2020s. We've made some very conservative assumptions there that they stop having to invest in their system about 2021, and they do very minor, as a percentage of their system, very minor investments beyond that. That won't be the case if there's CO2 legislation, for instance. The red shaded area is KU's energy costs. That's the sum of their fuel cost plus their non-fuel related energy cost. You pay that today. This is a projection of what that would be in the future. The increase in that part of it is based on projections of how fuel prices will change. But that's a fact. You know, how fuel prices turn out is something you have no control over. You just need to plan to be successful under a wide range of fuel prices in the future. So the bars are sort of split the same way. The bars are the total cost of the KyMEA portfolio. Again, the blue portion of the bar is the capacity cost, the demand cost. The dark maroon part of the bar is the energy cost of the KyMEA portfolio. It shows a very nice level of competitive advantage over the entire 10-year period. And because of the rights you have to potentially extend the purchase from Big Rivers and the purchase from Paducah, there's a good, that would contribute toward you being able to be competitive even over the longer term. Okay. Now, we could run thousands of these analyses and they would all produce a little bit different result, some a very significantly different result. But based on all the different analyses we've run, we can't look you in the eye and promise you any particular percentage advantage or any particular dollar advantage, but we believe there's an extremely high probability that there will be an advantage as you go into the 2020s. And the scenarios under which there wouldn't be are very hard to imagine, okay? The way the portfolio's been structured, the agency's cost will be roughly very similarly affected by changes in fuel prices. If coal prices turn up, being higher than now forecast, it'll have not exactly the same effect, but a very similar effect on KyMEA's cost and KU's cost. The agency's cost will be a little bit more sensitive to what natural gas prices are. If natural gas prices really go up dramatically, the agency will be a bit more affected than KU would be, but not such that the competitive advantage evaporates under most scenarios that you can imagine. Another major uncertainty is CO2 legislation. The way the portfolio is structured, the agency's cost should be no more sensitive to CO2 legislation than KU's, and probably will be less impacted than KU's. So if CO2 legislation occurs, it's likely to increase costs throughout Kentucky, but it's likely to impact KU a bit more than U, which, tends to keep you in that competitive advantage viewpoint. Okay. Another question in your mind should be, well, how does this work out? I'm only one, although Frankfort is a bit more than 50% of the all requirements members by load, right? But how does it work out? Because the agency's demand cost and energy cost are both projected to be lower, and considering the rate design principles we talked about earlier, the slide number 31 shows how it would be projected under the same basic scenario as the prior slide for each of the members. Now notice that the height of the bars is kind of different for each member. Okay? Frankfort is among the lowest of the group. And that's because Frankfort has, and again, we're not looking at retail rates here, we're just looking at wholesale power cost, okay? But Frankfort has a different customer mix than most of the other members. At the other extreme, you notice Benham, which is a very tiny member, their costs look to be much higher, but that's because they're almost 100% residential. In fact, they are 100% residential. Primarily, that's the difference. If you disaggregated Frankfort's cost, there's a higher cost to serving residential customers because of their load characteristics, and that part of your cost would look a bit more like Benham's. But you have some commercial customers, industrial customers, there's a lower cost of service to them. That's why the rates are adjusted a little bit differently for them, okay? So what it shows is that we believe there'll be the opportunity to set those rates so all the members enjoy a very similar, proportionate competitive advantage, whatever that competitive advantage turns out being. It's just for a single year as a snapshot of right about 2020. Okay? Thanks, Tom. Another question that's out there is one of the options that was presented through these proposals was the notion of buying from just a market supplier. And when we got several proposals to sell, I'll call it market-based power. And one of the more attractive proposals came from a particular entity. And we've used that as a basis for kind of showing you how you might compare to the market. And we've got two time periods, 2019 through 2022 and 2019 through 2029. And it shows under the KyMEA portfolio that the cost is a bit lower than the projected cost under the market purchases. Okay. The brown area is the energy rate that was proposed. The blue area adds on some capacity charges that would be necessary and some other related cost to get to the total cost. The two bars to the right show the same comparison for the entire 10 years, 2019 to 2029. And you can see that there's a bit more of a difference. The purpose in showing you this is that based on everything we know today, the agency's portfolio costs are projected to be very competitive with those that would provide energy to you from the market. You're not leaving money on the table relative to going with some kind of a market purchase over the period of time. Currently, power markets are severely depressed. They're kind of at the lowest level they've been at. But that is not projected to continue to be the case as we move through the 2020s. Will it be the case? There's uncertainty there. But these are based on real live proposals that were given to KyMEA and a reasonable calculation of what the total cost of service would be under those portfolios. And it shows that you're at least competitive with today's views of future markets, reflected in actual proposals. So our conclusions are basically the power supply portfolio that's been put together. It's reasonably related to the needs of all requirements members. It incorporates a ton of flexibility to adapt as renewables get to be more cost effective and to adapt to other changes that can't be known today. It's structured to allow you to remain competitive under a wide range of circumstances. A point of emphasis there, the fuel in the portfolio is not all that different. It's less dependent on coal than KU and a bit more dependent on natural gas, and it has the hydro mixed in, okay? So, but it's not so different as to make whether you're competitive or not teeter on any particular fuel price projection, and that's very important. If you went with market purchases, the market may turn out being lower. Today's expectations are that the market would turn out being higher. But the one thing about the market, it won't vary in the same way that KU's cost will vary. Given the portfolio, if fuel prices turn out being different, your cost and KU's cost are going to change in roughly similar amounts. You're going to remain more competitive. If you went with the market prices can change in very different ways than KU's cost can change. If you think about it, we've been going into a declining market over the last year or so, at the same time that KU has been having price increases. That's because their costs are not driven hardly at all by what goes on in MISO or PJM markets, okay? So bottom line, final thoughts. We at Infront have recommended the portfolio to the KyMEA board because we believe that it puts you in the position to remain competitive under a very wide set of future conditions. We believe it puts you in a position to exercise control over the decisions as you go forward regarding renewables and other power supply resources. We're not able to offer you an all renewables portfolio today, but we are able to say that you're positioned well so that as it makes sense to the group, as the technologies improve and change, you can take advantage when it becomes time to do so. From a standpoint of the member resources, the proposals provide you great flexibility. You can do what makes sense with member resources. If you go with the option one that's been proposed, it'll provide you a very stable flow of cash flow, of credits related to SEPA and any other member resources that you choose to take on. Basically, this whole program as it's put together, we think is consistent with the members' goals in setting up a KyMEA. Let's work together to better serve our customers. We believe the power supply portfolio does that. We believe that the all requirements contract is a very sensible mix of individual and collective priorities and should serve you well over a long period of time. So we're very pleased to be able to recommend both. Thank you for being so patient with such a long-winded presentation. I hope it was helpful. I'll be happy to, and with everyone else, to answer any questions.
Could you give us an example? You spoke of, I forgot how you phrased it, the hard to imagine scenarios that our power costs would be north of KU's at some point between 2019 and 2029. What would one of those hard to imagine scenarios look like? What kind of factors are in there?
Well, for instance, let's say that there was a dramatic increase in natural gas prices. That would put, as I've said, a bit more upward pressure on KyMEA's costs than KU's. In the 2020s, that would be an extraordinarily unexpected scenario. Moreover, if you would have some options to change your portfolio to offset that increase. And obviously, if natural gas prices go up dramatically, then renewables start to look better and start to be more cost effective sooner, because natural gas is the primary fuel for competing new resources, relative to renewables. So I'm not saying that the scenarios we looked at varied natural gas by 100% from the bottom to top, and it narrowed the margin some, but it didn't erode the benefits. Okay, so it would take an even greater level of shift in natural gas prices between now and then, and the portfolio allows you the flexibility to work toward mitigating that. So that's why I say it's hard to imagine, although I've learned in my life never to say, no, it can't happen. Okay. CO2 legislation. The contract with Big Rivers, it was very important to us that if you're going to have coal, if we had the option and we had a good proposal, we'd like it to be from a supplier that's within Kentucky. Because the rules that pertain to CO2 legislation are going to be state specific. Let's say we had gone to a 10-year contract with some party in Illinois. Okay. Well, the rules in Illinois might hit that party a lot harder than the rules in Kentucky, depending on how the CO2 legislation ultimately comes down. We didn't want you to be in that position where that could happen, and all of a sudden, wow, your coal resource is getting hammered by CO2 legislation and driving up your cost, but maybe KU's isn't being affected as much. So by contracting with Big Rivers in the great state of Commonwealth of Kentucky, we remove that risk that there could be a different state plan that impacts your resource a lot differently than KU's. We expect, in fact, that because of some retirements and resources that Big Rivers has done, they would probably be less affected by CO2 legislation than KU. But I can't assure you that that would be the case. We haven't sat down and been able to identify the CO2 scenario that hurts you more than KU. But I'm guessing one's out there. I just don't know what it is, and I can't articulate it for you. It's that kind of analysis. We've gone through the KU's demand cost. We've looked at a very conservative projection of their demand cost. In your portfolio, you have a fixed price on coal capacity for 10 years. It's not going to go up, except under very extraordinary circumstances related to change in law. Could there be a change in law? We can't perceive one that would drive up the cost of your capacity resources more than KU. In fact, we think they're more exposed than you are. We think that CO2 legislation could make them want to invest in new power plants even though they don't really need it to meet their load growth, which would drive up their demand costs more. So, we've analyzed, we've crunched numbers, and we've thought very creatively about what the risks are, what the uncertainties are, what their issues are. And every effort has been made to put you in a position where we can rightly say to you the chances of remaining competitive are extremely high, and you have the flexibility to adapt to as the future unfolds.
So you spoke about, the adaptability over the course of this 10-year capacity contract structure that we're basically signing up for here. So if, 2022, a few years in, a large demand reduction process or a large demand reduction project comes on the horizon, aren't there going to be some costs associated with signing up for that 10 years of capacity that are going to make a demand reduction activity like that look less attractive? And kind of a second part to that is what are the thoughts around putting those demand reduction projects and thoughts at the beginning of the process for the overall capacity planning for that 10-year window?
Okay. Well, kind of the first level is you're several months yet from deciding how much you want to buy from the Henderson project. We've included an amount in here because we kind of have to project out the cost. But, you know, you're going to continue to consider what the right amount is. And you may, instead of putting 150 in this first contract with Henderson, you might choose to put 100, leaving you a little more room to adjust your capacity portfolio out in the future. As late as June 1, 2019, you have the ability to go reduce the purchase from Paducah down to as low as 30. So
what was that date again?
by May 1, 2019. It's a 3-year notice requirement. So as time goes on, you know, you'll want to evaluate as you move closer to 2019, what is the amount that we need to purchase from Paducah? You'll have more information about your load forecast. You'll have more information about technological advances, and you'll take that into account. The agency board will take that into account in making that decision. So they might choose to purchase 50 or 60 instead of 90 to give them some more headroom there to adjust. The truth is that the marginal cost of capacity, if you were going out today to buy capacity in MISO, it's a few dollars a kilowatt a month, well less than the $4 you're going to pay in the early 2020s per kilowatt month. But when you look at projections, the $4 is looking attractive in the early 2020s, and it's looking more attractive in the late 2020s. But the value of demand reductions is going to be more driven by that contract for peaking capacity and what it would cost you to do something different under that contract and contracts like it. There were multiple contracts that were kind of in the same level in the first 3 or 4 years. They weren't more than $1 different per kilowatt month in the first 3 or 4 years, 3 to 5 years. So we feel pretty certain that we know what today's expectations of what capacity is worth in that time period, and you came out with a nice, attractive contract. And it's particularly attractive the further you go into the 2020s. So, you know, you're right. Let's just say that we start by 2019 to see tremendous advancements in storage, which might mean that renewables have a capacity value to them, where right now they're mainly energy as available whenever it's produced. But if you couple it with storage, it starts being where you can use it to serve your loads in a more dynamic way, right? It takes on a capacity value. Well, if that were to occur, you may choose to back down some on what you're going to purchase from Paducah starting 2022 in favor of some sliver of storage-backed renewables. Okay, I think that's a little quick for the economics to change that dramatically and the technology to change that dramatically. I think you'll be working to incorporate that kind of technology into your portfolio more toward the end of the 2020s and as you move into the 2030s. Just my view. And I think a lot of people would share that. It's just going to take, you know, keep in mind, when you do something from a power supply standpoint, you want it to be reliable and you want to not take on a lot of technological uncertainty and cost uncertainty. You want it, you want to be able to plan your rates, plan your program, and deliver reliable power without a lot of upset potential. And so you'll want to not be the earliest adopter of some of those technologies as they roll out. You want to let some things shake out before you get involved in some of those technologies. It's a time-proven tactic for utilities that want to manage themselves well.
But to be clear, my question was more about demand reduction and less about renewables.
Well, the
and solar
demand
technology.
reduction, there's a lot of room.
So we're not waiting on technologies
Yeah.
for that. We can do that
There-
today, and it's a benefit.
Now, keep in mind, there's two forms. There's active and passive, okay? direct load control under the all requirements contract is treated just like a member resource. So let's say you want to install a system of controlling various appliances in homes and businesses. Then the agency would work with Frankfort to, one, operate it to get its maximum value, and two, pass through to Frankfort whatever it really saves the agency in the way of capacity costs, so that you can maximize the value of that program. What you don't want to do is set up a system where individual members are incented to do something more than really makes sense for the group. If it's only going to save the agency $4 a kilowatt month, that's what you want to see credited for that capacity that you put on the system. You know, if you don't do it that way, then member A will, you know, if they're going to get a $10 credit, they're going to do things that don't make sense. But the agency's costs are only going down by $5 a kilowatt month. They're getting a $10 credit, so wow, they're over there, you know. But all it's doing is pushing costs toward another member. It's not really saving anything. And you don't want to be in that position as an agency because it'll incent members to do the wrong thing, things that don't make sense. Okay? And you don't want to be just moving dollars around between members. You want to be, but if a member invests in a resource, you want them to get 100% of what it truly saves the agency. So all of the benefit of their investment goes through to the member. And that's what this system does. It basically says if you do something in the way of direct load control or member resources, the agency is going to pay you what it's really worth to the agency.
That actually brings up another question I had from reading the pros contract in section 2 and items, what's it, E and G. It talks around that a little bit, and it touches on your comment you made earlier about collective interest versus individual interest. And it seems like we're ceding a lot of our individual interest to the collective, because in the example of, you know, if we do a large-scale individual demand reduction program or a large net metering infrastructure, that we can't individually benefit 100% from that investment, that we're ceding that to the group as a whole, where we would be assuming the entire cost of it, but we wouldn't necessarily be benefiting 100% from the benefit from it.
Well, I think
Did I read those two sections right?
I was part of drafting that, and I see it very differently. I see what that section is doing is making sure you get every aspect of the benefit that there truly is. Think
to the
about
whole
it.
group, not
No,
for our investment.
No, Frankfort. If you make the investment, you get 100% of the true benefit of that investment. That's what that says. Okay. Let me give you this example. If Frankfort was standing alone and going into the market and buying capacity to serve its load, you'd be spending around $4 a kilowatt month on that capacity to serve your load. And when you implemented that load control program, you'd be saving about $4 a kilowatt month in the early 2020s. That's what would happen if you were by yourself doing it. But you'd be doing it all by yourself. Okay? And it's harder to get benefit from a program like that against your load than it is to get benefit against the combined load that's twice as big. I've studied those programs, I've implemented them, I've helped. I guarantee you, it's a lot harder. So what's going to happen is if Frankfort wants to invest in a direct load control program, they can do it. The agency is going to work with Frankfort to facilitate it. If Frankfort wants to operate it, maybe on behalf of Frankfort and 2 other cities, a similar system, there's economies in terms of acquiring equipment. There's economies in terms of operating that system. The agency's already going to have a full-time desk sitting over there monitoring loads and scheduling resources, and you know, so turn it over to the agency and let them operate it to its maximum benefit, and then the agency figures out, you know, over the long run, what is it going to really save, and that savings gets passed through to Frankfort and maybe the other 2 cities that chose to be a part of that direct load control program. The other thing that the agency can do is they can take some of the volatility out of it. So if you make an investment, Frankfort makes an investment, and the agency's helping with it and signs a contract and says, well, you know, over the next 5 years, we think this will save us so much per kilowatt that you produce, you shave, and the value of each switch is X, so you can estimate the amount of demand reduction you're getting. The agency, you know, sits there and has the finger on the pulse of using that when they need it. They'll be able to use it less often than you would be acting alone. And they'll be able to give you a more steady stream of credits related to it that makes it more clear as to what your financial incentives are to do it. So there's nothing but benefit there. The only thing that language is trying to stop, because we've seen it in other agencies and it tends to tear apart the organization, is trying to stop using an all requirements rate as the incentive to do something, because the rate really doesn't, the all requirements rate doesn't really reflect the marginal cost of capacity in the region. It's based on the average cost. It has to be to allocate costs fairly. Okay? So you don't want people, the agency's KU's demand rate is what, over $13 per kilowatt month right now. The agencies would be lower than that, but it's not going to be $4 or $5 per kilowatt month. So if you allowed members to go out there and try to shave a peak, one, they're going to spend a lot of time and energy and inconvenience their customers trying to shave the peak against the $12 rate or the $10 rate or whatever it turns out being. And all they're going to do, to the extent they shave it, is move dollars back and forth between the members. There's going to be $4 of real savings, and the rest of it is just going to be shifting cost among the members. That's what the language is trying to not eliminate from this agency. It's trying to say, SEPA's worth this much, let's make sure that the SEPA members get that much. Paris's diesel is worth this much, let's make sure that Paris gets that much. If a member does something in the future, let's say you do a renewables project here, and it has some aspect of capacity value that the agency can figure out what that is, give you a little capacity credit, and then they can give you a credit for the actual avoided cost of energy. And that's as good as it gets, whether you're standing alone or acting together, but there's efficiencies in doing it together. Okay? So you're not giving up anything in that part of the agreement. That's actually a very favorable part of the agreement for all the members.
So one other, so when the RFP cycle was, well, in regards to that, so are there any inside MISO? Are there any providers out there that can produce dispatchable wind or solar resources?
Well, that's what this next effort is going to go toward. Let's go figure out what are the available renewables that could be incorporated. As I said, we have a lot of flexibility to adjust the amount of capacity, and we have total flexibility to schedule more or less from these resources you've contracted for. Let's go figure out what is the sensible renewable to implement in 2019 and fit it into the portfolio, okay? Or at least offer to fit it into the portfolio. And it may turn out being, well, we can do this, we can go out and contract for X megawatts of wind being imported from Oklahoma. There's a proposal to bring wind from Oklahoma over DC lines over here. Well,
There's another protection.
let's say that you signed up for that. But let's say that Frankfort was the only one interested, because it'll cost more than generating the same energy from the other resources. But let's say that that's still what Frankfort wants to do, and maybe 2 other members want to do it too. The contract has in it the flexibility to accommodate that kind of a project that only a few of the members want to do. But again, it's going to be handled in a way where the benefits and the cost of that project go through to those that want to participate in it. Okay? The portfolio is for the benefit of serving the whole load of everybody. It's possible that the board will look at its options on renewables and say, this sliver of renewables makes sense as part of our portfolio, and we're going to do it and just make it part of our portfolio. I don't know what the board will decide, but I'm sure based on the way I've seen their decision-making so far, they will make good decisions.
Well, did you ask if we were seeing any dispatchable renewables as a result of our first two RFPs?
But that's what I started to ask, but the real question was, are there any dispatchable renewables out there in MISO that we... Yeah, but are there any dispatchable resources out there in MISO?
Not that are renewables.
Okay.
They're all going to be, well, I shouldn't say that. None came forward to make a proposal.
Okay.
And we're going to find out if there might be some in this next phase.
Okay. And on the discussion around the flexibility in the program, did I understand that right, that we probably have more flexibility if we make our decisions along that lines prior to 2019, since we can adjust those capacity requirements for those 10-year contracts up front?
Yeah, it's important. There's one point, January 1, 2018, where certain decisions need to be made under those contracts. And then there's another one under Paducah that would be June 1st, 2019, where decisions need to be made. So it's really important that we make progress in 2017.
I just think you might want to make it clear on the Paducah one that 3-year option to reduce starts in 19 and continues as long as you give 3 years notice.
It's a one-time option.
One time, just then
to begin.
It's from then to the end of the year.
Yeah. The reason you're confused is that there were a little back and forth on that during the negotiations.
We retained an option. Okay, thanks.
So then to be clear on that, we have 1 3-year notice window for the coal resource out of Big Rivers to modify that contract for that 10-year period of time.
By January 1, 2018, there's an option to increase Big Rivers by up to 50 megawatts.
What about the other direction?
Not to go down.
Okay.
By January 1, 2018, there's an option to adjust Dynergy upward, just upward. 2017? January of 2017, and it's only upward, right? Okay. And then for Paducah, there's the option, that's a 3-year option to adjust it downward from 90 down to as low as 30. And is there an option earlier on Paducah to adjust the initial nomination? Or is that? And when does that occur? When is that notice? Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks.
It's between now and January of 17. So there's different dates with different adjustments that can be made. And then the decisions on extension occur in the late 2020s.
Thanks. That was all I had. I appreciate the presentation. And
There's one other point that I was asked to make that I skipped over. The contracts with Paducah, Big Rivers, and Energy start June 1 of 2019. The power supply needs start May 1. Okay. That was because to buy another month, MISO capacity year starts June 1. Okay. So it would take their resource, it would affect their ability to market their resource in the whole prior year. So there's options to go into the market and buy a month worth of energy for that bridge period, and that's what the agency will do. And then June 1, the resources will be available and you move forward.
excellent. That was great.
Any other questions for
Yeah,
me?
I just had a couple minor ones. On slide 32, you had mentioned that the power markets are depressed right now.
Right.
Why is that, or can you explain that a little bit?
Well, in MISO, there's been a surplus of capacity. which keeps capacity prices very low, supply demand. That is getting tighter because of retirements of coal units. And in fact, a large player in the market recently announced the retirement of some more coal units a few years down the road, which is going to make it tighter. Okay. And the second aspect of it, natural gas prices have been extremely low recently, and coal prices have dropped. MISO energy prices are driven by coal in some hours, and in some hours by natural gas. And fuel prices have been extraordinarily soft in the last, say, 12 months. And those two factors together cause an extremely low-priced market. But when you look at projections going out into the 2020s with the retirements going on in MISO, the capacity market tends to get tighter, and therefore capacity costs tend to go up when capacity is auctioned. And fuel prices are projected to increase, which tends to push up energy prices. And we had several market participants that gave pricing on energy purchases based on their expectations of future energy purchases. And we considered those in relation to the fuel price projections being used, and they made sense in relation to today's expectations of future fuel prices. So markets are very dynamic, and they're tended, when market prices start going up, there's a tendency to overbuild and cause cyclical nature in markets.
And kind of along that line, the contract or the study on renewables, to sign these contracts before that study is done, do you think that's sound to do, or should we wait for that study to be completed?
I think renewables are going to have to be feathered in over time. And these contracts provide you the flexibility to do that. There's, the agency has to, they've signed these power supply contracts. They're beneficial to the members. There's a need to get the member signing the all requirements power sales contract so the agency can continue on. In a few months, the agency is going to have to make commitments related to transmission service to deliver these resources to the members. That has to happen, and the agency shouldn't be doing that until the members have committed to the all requirements power contracts. So frankly, we wish that we were a few months back asking you. We had originally hoped to be back here in March and April, and things just turned out being a little harder than we thought to get everything done. But now is the time, and the sooner the better, especially for Frankfort as kind of a very, very major player in the agency. To take a step forward and commit to it will mean a lot to everybody.
And the members that aren't full all-service members, would you say for the most part there are people who are members that might want to become fuller members?
Eventually, at some point, OMU will want to consider being an all requirements member just like everybody else, and we believe it'll prove to be beneficial to OMU. There's some others that have expressed interest in considering joining. One of those would be retiring some coal units and becoming an all requirements member, we would think. Others have some resources and they would want to pool theirs and get some energy cost benefits, but they wouldn't be all requirements members for years and years.
John, one thing, just an additional point we didn't cover was the concern over adding capacity back to renewables. I think there were two questions related to that. Should I sing it to the microphone?
Yes, please.
All of these contracts that you see in front of you, please don't think that you're bound to those capacity payments with the flexibility that John talked about. But none of those contracts have restrictions to keep you from taking those contracts to market
if you want to replace internally what you use for your own portfolio for load. Each of these contracts has been negotiated in a very soft market, as John described earlier. We think they have tremendous economic value in remarketing opportunities too. So there's nothing related to when you look at those numbers John showed on the chart and when they occur in our flexibility. On any given day that an opportunity presents itself, as you've described in your questions, you can move a portion of your portfolio to the market instead and still gain economic benefit for your communities.
That's a good point, thanks.
I had no idea.
Can I try your patience for just 2 more minutes?
Please.
Because I just want to emphasize something that John said and just tell you a little more about this all requirements power supply contract, because that's what Spiegel and McDermott was involved in. And many of us have worked together on these kinds of projects for the plant board and for your other sister municipals for decades now. And I'm one of the people who's had the privilege of doing that. Just want to emphasize the 3 contracts that we're talking about are contracts between the agency and the power suppliers. So those will not be before you as the plant board. But what will be before you is the all requirements power sales contract. And everybody's nodding, everybody understands that. I just wanted you to understand how we got to this contract. 33 pages, it's dense, it's single-spaced, it's not easy to read. But it started, we at Spiegel represent a lot of, quite a number of other municipal joint action agencies across the country. And so in developing the contract, we surveyed sort of the best practices of contracts from looking at different models. And we came to the KyMEA board in about December, not with a contract, but with a set of concepts. And we sat down, and so month after month, we would get feedback on the concepts, we would refine them, we would find out what people thought was a good idea on this whole balance between the individual and the agency, and we would adjust. So we had several rounds of just concepts, and then we began to put it into contract form, which happened in about maybe February or March. And then since that time, we've been refining it month after month, bringing in the changes, the small changes, and it's sort of converged into what you have before you. And I just wanted you to understand that this is not something that we just, pulled out off a shelf somewhere and said, here, you need this contract. It was a product of the collaborative effort of Frankfort, and Vint and Herbie, as your representatives, are right there, making their points along the way, as were the other members, and that's how we got to where we are.
Another point on that, Vint has been actively involved in all the negotiations of these power purchase agreements, and frankly, he's been invaluable to that process, and we appreciate Frankfort's willingness to devote his time to that energy. He did a great job with it. So.
Thank you, John. Vince, anything else on this information item this evening?
No, anything else, I risk being beat for talking too long.
Okay.
So I'll just be quiet.
Well, very good. So we'll have this back on our agenda in August, I believe. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. See you. We have a public comment period. Don't know if there's anybody here wishes to make a public comment this evening. If you do, we ask that you come to the podium and identify yourself. Tell us whether or not you're a plant board customer. You do not have to be a plant board customer. We ask that you keep your comments concise and brief and to the point of FPB. Okay. Do we have anybody here this evening?
Yes.
Sir?
Hi, my name's Skip Hunt, plant board customer. What else did you ask for? I'm
Well,
sorry.
just, that's about it, but we ask you to keep your comments concise and keep them pertaining to FPB.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus of FPB customers that are voicing dissatisfaction with the quality of the cable data service. I'm aware of discussions that the board has had about adding bandwidth, and I know from my own experience and the things that I've heard being discussed, that there also are some issues within the cable network that present bottlenecks that are such that until those bottlenecks are cleared, adding bandwidth is not going to necessarily help everyone. And it's clear that the ability to deliver service has been oversold. There are consistently periods of time when the service is unreliable and slow, but the issue is not so much speed as it is the stops and starts in the service. My wife and I have been a plant board customer in general forever, just about. In terms of cable data service, we had service between July of 2003 to December of 2007, and then again from July of 2014 until now. And there's a dramatic difference in the level of service in this last period than there was in the original period. And things, and even during this period of service that we've had since July of 14, you can tell that it's going downhill. And just based on my experience in information technology strategy and network development and all those kind of things, I understand what a hard job that is to manage. But I really feel like the plant board management and the board should address to its customer base the fact that a service is being sold that can't be delivered. And it would be nice to know, for the customer base to know what the strategy is moving forward to address that, both in the short term and in the long term. And I've been professionally involved with the principals at Kentucky Wired for a long time, and I know what sort of development cycle they're going through and what the prospects are there. And a point's going to come when that's going to be extremely beneficial to the plant board and its customer base, even though it isn't right now. And hopefully your strategy in working on the infrastructure, the middle part of your network, the part that's between the customer's equipment and your internet gateway, hopefully the strategy for working on that is not putting good money after bad, but is about addressing a strategy that will improve that over time, and also in terms of adding bandwidth to the network in general. So it would just be nice for the customers to know that the plant board is addressing those problems, and specifically what kinds of things are comprise the strategy both in the short term and the long term. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you.
Do we have anybody else? If not, we'll move on to information items, departmental reports. Website customer comments. John?
Thank you. Harvey Couch passed on the customer comments, came through the website over the course of the last nearly 30 days or so on page 61 and 62. The board's had an opportunity to look at some of those. I think there were I believe there were three. starting on page 63, from a departmental report standpoint, I really want to focus on one area. For the month, as you know, the Cable Telecom Department cut over its telephone switch for nearly 7,000 lines starting on June 8th. And if you'll look all the way to the right on page 63, you'll notice that what we call in our customer information system a value feature for telephone, and what it became over the course of about a week or so was really a place to put almost any trouble call associated with the telephone cutover. As you could see, 333 is the count we had for the month as it was designated within SIBS, Customer Information Billing System. The majority of them broke down into those 300 or so trouble calls broke down into really four basic areas. More than half of them were resolved by the time we touched base with the customer, and that was over the course of the first 48 hours or so of the cutover, starting on June 8th and going to June 10th. The next thing was a customer education issue and for voicemail, and also a voicemail setup issue that we had that we resolved again within the first 2 days. The number 3 thing was we had to balance the line. Basically, it's a rebooting of the MTA itself. That we had some MTAs that just didn't like the move, quite frankly, from one switch to the other, and so we spent a bit of time doing that. Also, caller ID refresh. Basically, we had to unload it and reload it back up again. And last but not least was something that we hadn't done before, and we've had an issue with a few times over the years, and that is the international calling. Took the advice of the folks at Big River, and they, as a kind of a default setting they have within international calls on their switch, is that they don't activate the ability to make international calls unless the customer requests it. We didn't really have a way to, our workaround for that was, that would have been a pretty major change, obviously, from the way that we had done it before. And so through the folks at IT department, they went through 12 or 18 months, I can't remember, to be honest with you. Anybody that had made an international call within a 12 or 18 month period, we activated their international calling because they had shown some previous calls. And we thought it was probably best to do that. And over the course of the last month or so, we've had a few other customers call us and request to turn that on. It'll be part of, it's already built into the part of what the customer service reps do is they talk to customers that come in and establish telephone service with us for the first time. It'll be one of the questions, actually already is, one of the questions that's asked as you sign up for service, whether you want to have your phone number have the capability of making an international call. On the remainder of the reports for the month on pages 64, you'll see it's a pretty light month for June, just with some couple of power supply failures, a fuse and a trunk amp failure. It's a pretty light month. We're pretty happy about that. And then on page 65, all right, it shows the customer counts for the month of June. And I don't think I'm saying anything different here. You're seeing anything different that you haven't seen over the last few months. We continue to lose some cable customers. We're doing fine on our broadband. We've gained customers over the course of the whole year, and we're pretty good above our budget by about almost 500 customers. And then we lost some phone and long distance customers. Security's stayed stable. It's maybe gone down just a little bit, and our pay-per-view is dependent on what the lineup is for any particular month. But it was a pretty good month for pay-per-view, to be quite honest with you. I'll be happy to entertain questions and answer what I can for you.
Okay, ready for customer service? Monique?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You'll notice that customer service reports are on pages 66 through 68 of your board packages. You will also notice that some of the graphs that have changed in this board packages. We're going to be coming with some different types of numbers going forward. We've been able to now capture, using our ShoreTel system, we have the capability of obtaining some numbers that will assist in setting some metrics, not only for the department, but for the individual CSRs, and then studies that involve repeated observations over different periods of time. we'll be able to bring you some additional numbers. Some of the numbers that we're going to be reviewing and some of the areas that we're going to be reviewing will require that the most time, and how, if possible, we can streamline those processes. You'll notice on page 68 of your board package, we have drilled down the percentage of customer service tasks that take the majority of the time. We've come up with about 81.9% of our customer interactions require about an average of 14 minutes per customer. A lot of what we're doing, start and stopping service, payment arrangements, billing breakdowns and inquiries, those take the longest amount of time. So we're going to be working with IT, looking at our CIBS system and seeing if there's ways that we can drill down those processes and streamline them so they don't take as long for each of the individual customers. That'll help impact our wait time. I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
As part of those discussions with IT, or is there a consideration to have online start-stop service?
Yes, we're looking at a variety of different things with what can be done through the portal, what can be done over the phone as opposed to customers actually coming into the office, and a lot more self-service type things.
Changing gears just a second, just to refresh me, because I had this question asked of me. On the cycle billing, will a customer have a choice as to whether or not they're going to have the billing cycle changed, or is it?
No, sir. The billing cycle.
Preordained.
The billing
It's gonna
cycle
happen.
that they fall into is going to be based on their read schedule.
Okay. The other thing is, I see you have an action item this evening, is number 9, this proposed contract with KyMEA Research. Would you be willing to go ahead with that right now?
Give me a second to grab my paper.
Okay, this is to consider approving a contract with KyMEA Research Consultants, LLC, to perform a customer service survey at a cost of $19,900.
Okay. In June 2016, the board approved that FPB 2016-17 fiscal year budget, which included $20,000 to perform a customer service survey. The survey will measure the overall performance of the members of the customer service department, and this survey will assist in determining how well the staff is meeting the expectations of the FPB customers with regard to delivering good customer service. Staff met with Leanna Comer of Comer Research Consultants, LLC, and obtained a cost of $19,900 to conduct a comprehensive transaction survey over an approximate 6-month period, randomly selecting samples of customers who've contacted the customer service office the previous month, and this would be both walk-in and telephone customers. The sample size will allow for database on service line, type of transaction, customer service representative, customer demographics to better identify specific opportunities for improvement. Ms. Comer, who is the owner of Comer Research Consultants, has managed multiple projects commissioned by the Frankfort Plant Board, including a feasibility study regarding implementation of fiber optic service and cable channel preferences survey. Additionally, in 2014, Comer Research conducted a broadcast channel preference survey on behalf of the Frankfort Plant Board. Staff recommends that the board approve the agreement with Comer Research Consultants, LLC, as a professional services contract. The Assistant GM of Administration has reviewed the agreement and it meets with his approval. And Ms. Comer's resume and a copy of the agreement are in your board packages.
Members, questions for Monique?
I have one. I'm not sure if it's for Monique or for Herbie. How does this tie into the GM's goal for the year for implementing the process of continuous improvement? Is this a one-off survey, or is this tied into that sum, or?
The answer is yes, it's tied in. This will give us a benchmark. Hans is working with Monique, and they are developing a survey to hand out to customers as they walk in, as one example of doing getting continuous feedback from the customer. But a more in-depth customer satisfaction plan is being developed.
I don't think that the plant board has ever done a survey that is just focused exclusively kind of on the customer service aspect of customer service delivery, that front end, for lack of a better term, if you will. I know Ms. Comer's done some research for John in the past on, what cable stations would you like, and the goal here is to kind of try and break that front end segment, if you will, out to get a benchmark of where you are, know where you're at, so you can determine where you're headed in the future. And APPA also has some recommendations, sort of informal methods that you can use. It can be as simple as an index card that you leave. Was it easy to do business with us today? If not, can you make some suggestions? Just informal, quick methods of getting some feedback. And then, Monique's also working on some Survey Monkey type things, and or Question Pro type things that we can put in like we use on the credit card survey, that we could send out, that would capture more, I guess, the electronic driven customer versus the customer that's more of a paper-based traditional type methods. You get those folks when you walk in. You get kind of a snapshot with a Survey Monkey type thing, and then you have a more formal survey, statistically, calculated sample size and that kind of thing that this item focuses on. So that's sort of the plan.
How does this break down by business line? Most of our customers are electric customers. And, a lot of water customers, of course, but it's only about 27-28% of our revenue comes from the cable telecom. But because of the nature of cable telecom, all the varieties of services that we offer, and all the zillions of things that affect it, customer satisfaction, how does this break down there? Is it, in other words, if you're going to survey mostly cable people, you're going to get a lot more complaints.
Not necessarily.
If you discuss electric people, probably won't get many complaints.
Well, what the questioning is going to be based on, the questions will actually be designed and drill down where the customer was calling, what line, whether they came into the office, whether they called the office, whether they had questions or if they had issues regarding their cable, their electric, their water, if they needed an adjustment. And the information that we get back, the results will be based on line of service that the customer actually had an issue with, and how the customer service representative handled that particular situation, not necessarily whether or not the customer was disgruntled with their cable service, but how the customer service agent was able to assist them.
I'm happy to say I get compliments all the time on our people, our service people, that customers are very happy with the way they were treated.
Glad to hear that.
I mean, they are. They're appreciative when they feel like the installer or the person coming out there on the problem seems like they show a genuine interest in helping them and solving it, courteous, professional.
So Monique, have we used Comer Research Company in the past?
Yes, we have. She completed some survey studies, not only for the cable department, but she did a feasibility study. John has worked with her before.
Oh, it sounded like from a resume that that was part of another company she used to be with.
She was with another company, Preston Osborne, and when she was with Preston Osborne, she actually did the projects for the Frankfort Plant Board, and then after forming her own company, she did another project for the plant board.
Do we need a motion?
We do.
I have one more question first. Is this something we have to put out for bid? What are the limits on having to do things like that?
Yeah, it's a professional service contract. You can, $20,000 is the threshold, but as a professional service contract, those aren't, you don't have to go through a bidding process. And because she's worked with us before, we can go back to that same firm. So it saves a little bit of time in that RFP process.
Do we have a motion?
I make a motion we consider approving a contract with KyMEA Research Consultants, LLC, to perform a customer service survey at a cost of $19,900. $19,900.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Hearing no no's, motion carries. Thank you, Monty.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, where are we? Electric Department. Scott.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, as you turn to page 69 in your SAIDI graph, we had a total of 44 outages for the month of June, and you can see as on according to SAIDI graph, we are running about even for the last 3 months on our SAIDI number. Going to give you a little bit of information. July the 7th or 8th, this is on a Friday, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact date. We were contacted by Owensboro Municipal. They had a storm come through on Thursday night, and they had about 8,000 customers knocked out Thursday night, and they still had 3,000 on Friday morning. We sent 8 employees and 4 trucks to Owensboro for the weekend and helped restore power there. So that's all I have. If you got any questions about outages, I'll be happy to entertain those.
SEPA, we talked about SEPA tonight already.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll refer to page 70 in your board book, you'll see the graph of our SEPA energy year to date. We lost approximately $15,000 on our SEPA energy this month. And this was a month where we typically try to schedule the maximum amount of energy available to us. And with the market that John Painter discussed previously, we're just not earning a profit on our energy. Our energy cost us approximately, if you turn to page 71, if you look down at the notes in the bottom block, the far right-hand note at the bottom indicates our energy from SEPA cost us $34 a megawatt hour. If you go to the left-hand note, the average cost that we got for it was $29, so we're losing money on the market. If you go to the second column in that spreadsheet under SEPA capacity, you'll see 13,605. That's the capacity that we're being allotted during this interim period while Center Hill Dam is being repaired. But our allotment through our SEPA contract is actually 15,621 kilowatts. And that is the capacity that John Painter was talking tonight, that we would be paid $4 a month for that capacity. So going forward under the KyMEA model, we would be getting a check for about $60,000 a month for our capacity. And on top of that, then we would get a credit from KyMEA on the energy. So that's what John was talking about, seeing a value in our SEPA energy going forward. Page 72, you'll see through May of 2016, we've lost $85,000 in our SEPA energy. Our projection in the new budget that was just passed, I think we were showing a loss of approximately $200,000 for the fiscal budget year in SEPA. And Center Hill Dam is not expected to be complete until the first quarter of 2018, so that's probably the next opportunity we see of SEPA being in the black again. Answer any questions.
Got it. KyMEA, we've already dealt with KyMEA tonight, so we'll move on to safety. Hi, Ken.
I have 2 OSHA recordables to report this month. They were both strains and sprains type injuries. Strains and sprains are typically the biggest culprit when it comes to OSHA recordable injuries and workers' comp claims. So we did have a meter that stepped in a hole and turned his ankle, and then a mechanic was operating a wrench and strained a chest muscle. We also had a minor accident where a cable 10 employee scraped a concrete post over at the service center near the gas tank, so doing minor damage there. Thank you.
Hey, water distribution. Get up here, Billy. You gonna do like Jimmy Allen did? You gonna retire on us?
I am, sir.
Okay, well, I want the public to know this is Billy Briscoe. He's our water and superintendent. He's worked many years for the plant board and done a wonderful job for us. This is his last meeting. Don't you just hate not being able to commit?
Well, I can't say I'm going to miss it too much, but I would like to say that I've worked with a lot of good people here, made a lot of good friends, and have really enjoyed my years here. And Alan Smith will be the new water distribution superintendent. I think you'll find that the distribution department will be in good hands going forward.
Anybody comments for Billy or any questions or anything? What are you going to do a lot of fishing or something?
I plan on doing some fishing and hunting. So, your water distribution reports are on page 75 through 77. We had put in a total of 6 new services for the month of June. We had a total of 6 main breaks. There were a total of 3 outages, and those were all a result of main breaks. And I'll answer any questions.
I just want to comment on the fine job they did with the trailer park issue. You know, I heard nothing but compliments from the people out there on the swiftness that we were able to get that job done, although they're waiting for some plumbers to do their work. But as far as the plant board, they were very complimentary of the effort that was done. So,
Yes, sir.
nice efforts.
Thank you again, Billy.
Mr. Chairman, if I may have just a moment, I'd like to, Billy is retiring, but I would just like the public to know that Billy's one of the quiet professionals that gets the job done every day. You don't see him a lot in front of the public, but he's been a great asset to the plant board for a long time, and we're gonna miss him greatly. His replacement, Alan's been here a long time too, and he'll do a great job and won't miss a beat. But just for the public to know, Billy's one of those folks that supplies your water every single day. He makes sure it's good water. He makes sure it's provided to you in a economical manner, and provides great customer service. And you just don't get that kind of long-term employee in service and every day. And I'm just very proud to have worked with him for all these years.
Talking about every day, making sure we get good water. Here's the man. Here's another one.
I'm the quiet one
Here's
also.
another one.
During the month of June, the water treatment plant produced greater than 263 million gallons of potable water with an average daily demand of 8.8 million gallons. River conditions are favorable. Recent precipitation in the watershed has maintained adequate flow with a recorded water temperature of 80.5 degrees Fahrenheit at the end of June. Open to any questions that you might have regarding the water quality.
8.8, so?
Well, that was in June. Actually, you know, it's the temperatures actually dropped a little bit because of recent rain we've had here. As you get rain and the water, you know, we get more water in the river, the temperature actually goes down for a while. It's when the flow recedes, that's when the temperature comes back up on us. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer. Thank you.
Admin. Mr. Misty.
Good evening. The contractors continue to make good progress at the administration building. Over the last month, some of the significant items that have occurred are the majority of the roofing work is now complete. They're just doing miscellaneous detail work. Most of the major rooftop equipment was set. The one that you see when you drive by the most, there's the frames and the glass continue to be installed. And of course, the electrical and mechanical contractors continue with conduit pipe and duct installation. Some of the upcoming work includes finishing all the frame and glass installation in the punched openings, which is basically all the windows. They hope to finish the glass installation by the end of this week or early next week. And then the next step, you'll start seeing them move towards the front entrance and the stairwell. They'll start installing those frames and glass as well. Drywall installation on the first and second floors should also be completed within the next 30 days. Still continue to work positively with our field inspector. He's been providing field reports and daily reports. He pretty much goes out there every day, and you know, he keeps in touch with both me and the architect as far as any items he comes across. And I have a few pictures on pages 79 through 81, and happy to answer any questions.
Glass on site?
Yes, all the glass is on site. It's been delivered. It was the last of the glass was delivered on Monday.
Okay, Headend.
I'm sure Adam's going to be disappointed he missed out on the meeting tonight with we're going to require him later to watch the whole meeting on TV. But seriously, they've been working 10-hour days for about 3 weeks now, or 4 weeks now at the Headend crew and the construction folks. And so I'll just give you a real quick rundown of what he's got going on right now, what you might expect over the next few weeks. They started with our cable TV service. It's really the most time-consuming part to move. As of earlier today, when I was talking with Adam, they had moved about 60 or so channels. The method they decided to use was to really get some practice on the front end to move the equipment out of the old into the new head end. And so they started with the tier that had the fewest amount of customers. That's our sports tier that has a little bit fewer than 100 or so customers. Worked their way down to the HD tier, which has about 700 or so customers, and then they work into their the premium channels, HBO, Showtime, Cinemax, etc. I think on the low end we have a couple of hundred customers on Cinemax. On the high end, I think we have 1,500 or 1,600 customers on HBO. They've been able to move the majority of that during the day, and the typical outage of a channel, as they physically unplug the receiver, walk it across from the old to the new, has averaged about 3 minutes. We've been pushing info back and forth between customer service and the head-end folks to let folks know what they're going to move over the course of a day or so. As we get into our digital cable tier, we have about 5,500 or so customers on that tier, and then our expanded basic cable lineup, which all of our customers have, about nearly 14,000. We're going to convert over and start really making those channel changes and moves in the overnight. And so they're planning to start. I don't believe it's going to be this week. It's probably be more like Monday of next week to start moving that. We're taking extra care to really pay attention to what we're moving and how we're moving. You've got Democratic Convention next week, Monday through Thursday, pretty much 7 o'clock to about midnight or so. And then he really needs to get most of that stuff moved in a frame of probably a little after midnight or 1 a.m. to before 6 o'clock, and move as many as he can, as quickly as he can. The next timetable that you really got to pay attention to is the Olympics start on Friday, August 5th, I believe. And so the goal is to be completely moved before the Olympics start, because that's going to be the most service impacting. There'll be plenty of information out through social media, the newspaper, commercials, letting folks know about the outages. Any particular channel should be 3 or 4 minutes at most. The next thing after that, they've got a vast majority of the fiber done inside the building, a lot of the internal wiring inside the building done. We've scheduled with Eris, our provider for CMTS equipment. They are due in, I'm sorry, I don't have a calendar in front of me, Monday, August 26th, 7th, 8th, whatever that Monday is of that last week of August. I don't remember the exact date. And that's going to be over the course of, Casey, you need to help me here, about a week. It's about that whole week, but I think it's customer impacting probably 3 of those 5 days. I don't think it's going to be every night. But we're going to do plenty of customer notification at that point. There's going to be some other things we're going to have to move back and forth and get fiber actually connected from the outside to the inside of the building eventually. But our goal is to get the vast majority of that work done by early September. For a comparison standpoint, I talked to Herbie about this the other day. I was talking with a friend that kind of is the Atom of Conway, Arkansas, a municipal utility just a little bit bigger than we are, about the same size. They built a new head end and got into it, actually had it turned over to them in April of 2015. When I was talking to Jason the other night, he says he's about 60% cut over the course of 12 months. He has the luxury of time. They're doing some other network upgrades as they do it in the field. And so just as a, we've not moved a head end before, so I wasn't really sure exactly how long something like that should take. But another municipality about the same size, is a facility pretty similar to what we have, is really taking their time. And over the course of about 13 or 14 months, he still has a way to go. So we have a way to go too. And our customers will communicate with him as much as we can, as often as we can. And Adam will be here next month to give you really a better analysis of what he's got completed and what he has left. Thank you.
All right, that's information items for departmental reports. Agenda item number 6 is an action item. This concerns our old friend, open source software options. Consider adoption policy to include open source software options in all future new software acquisitions.
This is a carryover from our last special meeting, and I promised everybody a sentence on what that policy or what that directive would be. I'm afraid I over-delivered and came up with 2 sentences. James. So in short, the sentences, or 2 sentences, when considering new software or hardware systems or renewing licenses for existing systems, staff will research and consider open source alternatives. Prior to new software or hardware system implementation or license renewal, the analysis of considered open source alternatives will be presented to the board.
Question of staff, would this change what we already do or not? I mean, do we already do this?
Yes, as we previously stated, we, got a copy. Thank you. As staff stated before, we don't, nor have we ever, to my knowledge, eliminate potential software based on it being commercial or open source, solely on that. We understand the responsibilities for recommending hardware software solutions for the plant board. We rely on our education experience to select the appropriate solution. Our goal is to provide the best possible solution meeting current and future needs for the staff. So yes, we would say we don't just eliminate any potential software person just based on it's commercial, it's open source. If that, hope that answers your question.
When you propose a new source or hardware system or new software or license renewals, do you come to us now already as a matter of course or not?
That would depend on the cost of the software. Also, if some software now is on state price contract, so we can purchase off that. To answer his question, I said we don't always come to the board when we buy software. Depends upon the cost. Also, a lot of software now is available on state price contract, so we're allowed to purchase off of that as well.
Can you give us examples of major systems that have been implemented in the plant board where open source alternatives have been investigated?
It's been a while since we've really, I guess what I would say, consider a major project. It's been a while since we've, thank goodness, actually had to. Yeah, I guess he was made, and your definition of major could, but we installed Splunk, which is a server logging software. We had SolarWinds product that we were paying for, a commercial product. Does that fall on the lines of major? Usually when we do major projects, like the GIS, it's not an IT solution. There was actually a committee from several departments. RFPs, bids were sent out, and the group selectively, IT at that time is just a voice on the committee. We're not the sole representative or sole picking.
Have you ever done analysis or comparisons between any of the other major systems you already have in, database technologies or web-based technologies, or any of those things against the often best-of-breed options that are out there in the open source world?
Oh, yes. We are always looking out at there's always new software. Open source is, it's in some ways booming industry. We keep abreast, we research, we rely on research. We subscribe to research entities to help us with our research. Yes, with AutoCAD, we talked to staff actually about a open source option. Back in GIS, back then we did that. I don't think there was any back then. That's been such a long time since we've done that I really couldn't recall. But yes, we don't. I say we've never intentionally I'm not looking at open source. We vet, and we do want the best solution, and we're not tied to a commercial
product.
On item 6, I'd like to make the motion that we consider adopting a policy to include open source software options in all future new software acquisitions.
Second.
Okay, now the motion and the second, there's no mention there of before
No, sir.
implementing
No,
heading
sir. The
to.
motion I made is number 6, the under action item that we have on our agenda.
And so that means the sentence that we forwarded this on for, or did we word this wrong, or how's that going?
Well, the motion that I heard was to consider when considering new hardware systems, we'll research and consider open source alternatives. But it did not say that it has to be brought before the board.
Well, I guess the word policy, and I guess I'm looking for, so we're talking about this policy, just to be clear?
Well, what the motion I made was what apparently what you and Anne Marie Rosen had discussed but previously, and I'm just bringing it up. And like you said, we brought it forward to this meeting, and the action item says consider adoption of a policy to include open source software options in all future software acquisitions.
That's great. Just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same policy. So we're talking about this one.
Are we in discussion?
Yes.
I guess my question is, I don't know that I'm against it, but it talks about renewal. Before we renew any license renewal, the analysis of considered open source alternatives will be presented.
No, now you're reading from this, and that's not the motion I made.
I believe it is the motion, the policy that we're talking, the word policy refers to this.
That's what I understood, that this was the policy that we were.
So we had this discussion in the previous meeting, and we hadn't defined what policy was, and I had it to do to.
This was on the agenda that.
Right. Oh, I see.
That's the motion I made with what we have on the agenda for tonight.
Is this the policy that we're referencing in item number 6?
I have no idea.
Yes.
I think the answer is yes.
Yes, I think so.
My question is this: when it comes to renewals, that is sometimes a 1 year or a 3 year out. You renew. I would be concerned if we're considering all renewals or license renewals, if there is a program, let's say the finance program that we bought just a year or so ago, to not renew that program without, probably 6 months or a year advanced study, would cause problems with our ability to be able to do payroll or something of that nature. I'm not sure that I'm fully on board with the renewal part.
Well, the goal of it is not, or the thought behind there is not for it to become onerous, and I think we can interpret that either way. And I think interpreting it in a milder way, I think, is more appropriate. The goal here is just that there's, an iterative evaluation of long-term systems. So I don't think we have to assume that there's going to be a massive research effort behind it when there's a renewal. It could be as simple as, what are other options out there? If there are viable ones, then maybe that triggers a larger review process. But certainly not every time we renew any license, there's months and months and months of effort to go and see what our options are and to renew each option.
Well, I'm just thinking that if we don't do the research ahead of time, then when it comes to the board for approval for the license renewal, and they don't bring forward a open source solution recommendation or to show that they've looked at it, then we run into a problem with that license agreement lapsing, and the support we get from that contractor goes out the window.
Well, this is saying that they should look at it, though, that they should.
But I guess the
make
point
that
is,
part of the
it's
process.
about how exhaustive that is. right?
Exactly, because if and I hate to pick on the finance system, but if the finance system, if that software program is working for us, it's doing what we need to do, then there may not, it's going to come up for renewal, and like most things that happen, 2 or 3 months out, you get the notice, you know, hey, it's going to renew at the end of June, for example. Well, now all of a sudden we've got to kind of scramble to try to find an alternative program that's open source, and I'm just concerned that, you know, in doing that, then that may have an adverse effect on our ability to be able to provide whatever that software program is being used for. I mean, I would hate to think that come time to renew our financial package, we don't renew it because it's not open source.
Right. And that's not the goal of this. I mean, the goal, again, is not to produce some prodigious amount of work every time a software license is nearing end. It's simply to turn our focus so that we're considering new options with some periodicity.
So,
and I think it's enough to go out and consider alternatives at a high level. If there is one that's very promising, maybe that triggers a deeper look. But I don't know that we have to interpret it in the most onerous way that we possibly could. I think we can take a lighter view on it and just view the intent, which is to have.
The motion that I made had nothing to do with presenting it to the board prior to adoption,
well,
prior to license renewal.
I know. I mean, I read the statement that you proposed, the proposal that you made. But in there it says consider adoption of a policy. Well, the policy is what Mr. Baldwin handed to us. That is the policy that we're adopting by your motion.
I don't see anything about the policy in the write-up that we have in here.
Well, but it's in the motion. It's consider adoption of policy, and this is the policy that's being proposed. But maybe Carl could comment on whether you think this would be a burden or if that's something that we could easily incorporate.
I guess staff would say we do look at open source options today, so say this staff wasn't, I didn't bring this out before the board, so we don't show bias to commercial or open source. We do our due diligence. That's what I would tell you. So,
Well, I'd like to withdraw the motion if we have to include presenting it to the board prior to renewable licenses. I don't think there's a second anyway.
There was a second.
Mr. Baldwin, I understand your consideration of wanting to do it on stuff that we have going forward in any new software or hardware system. I just, like I said, I know you say, well, we can take it lightly or not make it so onerous to do. I just, when we put this policy in place, then, who determines what level of scrutiny is put on it? Is IT or whoever is presenting the software need request, if they come forward and say, hey, we looked at it and we couldn't find open source, or the open source we found doesn't really meet our needs, is that suitable? Or, is there going to be some long, drawn out, discussion about it, research about it? I'm not sure how you weigh.
Well, I think it's reasonable.
Degree.
I think it's reasonable to let it play out. I mean, I guess again, the thought is that you don't interpret it in the most onerous fashion, and as these things come along, I think we address them. I don't think that there's going to be a long, drawn-out discussion around it. And as Carl's indicated, they feel like they already comply with this, so we're not talking about it in burden. So I think we let it go and we see, what the system's like. If we need to adjust and have a stronger policy around it, we can have a stronger policy later if we want to, but I think it's reasonable to have a policy that just sets a direction at this point. It just defines the intent, and then we can, if we need to make it more onerous and a bigger structure around it, we can do that later. But I think having a lighter policy with lighter restriction and lighter burden is a better way to start.
Well, if we remove the license renewal, I think I could be happy with it. And the reason, I think, you know, if you were having a problem with a system, and it wasn't doing what it was you now need it to do. In other words, maybe something has changed so that you have to look to buy a new software system or a new hardware for some reason or another. Then you apply this standard of researching for open source. But if it's a renewal, you know, the Kronos system, which is our payroll system, I don't think that's open source.
No.
It's not. I don't think so. And so right now, if we want changes made to it, we go through Kronos to make those changes. Correct? I'm sorry. I just thought it was your system. So I mean, so Kronos. In other words, if you tell them, hey, I want it to calculate this cost figure in a different way because let's say the state recommends or the state requires some new tax structure or something, you have to go to them. We can't go in there and make those changes to the software. Because that's what open source is we have the ability to make changes, correct? So, you know, if that's the case, if it no longer works for us, then that means we're going out to look for a new payroll system. And if that's the case, then yes, let's look at open source alternatives. But just to renew the license when everything is going well, I see that as a potential for causing problems. Because we may not interpret what, you know, taking a lesser look or whatever you said, a less onerous look at it might in turn. So,
Right. But you're also presupposing there that if you did a quick analysis to see what other systems out there, that you would immediately decide not to renew that license. That's not necessarily what would follow. If you look out there and you see better options out there, your implementation schedule might be months, years, very far into the future, right? You may simply, by that process of continually looking at what's out there, discover that here's a better system we can move to, we could have this additional capability. We don't have the manpower or the time or the dollars to do it now, but in 6 months and a year and 5 years we could, so that puts that on your horizon. It doesn't mean you still don't renew that license, but it makes you aware of what's happening out there in the landscape. It makes you more engaged.
and I believe this board would do that, but I wonder about future boards that may interpret that different and to say, no, every renewal, it's going to have a detailed open source analysis done. And we're not going to approve this purchase unless that's done. It just seems like it opens the door to a lot of potential problems when you're not really trying to create.
Well, then maybe we can make a minor modification to the renewal part and just say a high-level survey or something that's a milder interpretation, so that more directs it towards the goal, which is to have the visibility in the industry and what's happening, and make sure that we're considering the options.
Well,
So that we codify that a little bit.
if you got time to rewrite your policy or make those changes, that we could.
Maybe we ought to table it to the next meeting, next month.
That would also table item 7, right?
I'm like Rick, license renewal part bothers me. I know it sounds innocent, but it does bother me a little. I have some hesitation on the license renewal. If it came back next month without the license renewal, I think I'd be inclined to support it.
Well,
Anyhow, we've had a motion, we've had a second, we've been batting it around for a while now, so.
I think
I
I
thought
agreed,
No.
he
I withdrew my
withdrew.
motion.
Well, if there's a second, can you withdraw it after there's a second? I don't know.
I would consider it withdrawn, but the item's not been acted on. Any member would be free to make a new motion as they see fit.
So how about this as a modification? So When considering new software or hardware systems or renewing licensing for existing, oops, need to remove that one too. When considering new software or hardware systems, staff will research and consider open source alternatives. Prior to new software or hardware system implementation, analysis of considered open source alternatives will be presented to the board. Prior to license renewal, a high-level survey will be conducted, and those results are presented to the board. Is that mild enough?
All right, read if you don't mind, read your last sentence again.
Prior to a license renewal, or a high-level survey will be conducted and presented to the board. Instead of an analysis, just a high-level survey of what's out there, what are our options.
Okay. I think I can go along with that.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? You comfortable with it?
That's your motion, all right? So that's what we're
I
gonna.
think it's the same motion, but just different policy, right? To get back to that discussion, sorry.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I second.
I thought it was your motion.
Okay.
Oh, I'll second it. I'll second it.
Any discussion? Anybody still got any discussion? Okay.
Need you to read it again, so that would be the motion.
I see, I understand that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Hearing no nos, motion passes.
What you're asking for your own clarification.
So now we're up to 7.
Okay. Agenda item number 7 is an action item. Consider removal of funding for virtualization software that's Nutanix, pending evaluation of open source options.
And all this item is just basically having that process that we just adopted take place before we move forward with that particular item.
Could we have a quick synopsis of what virtualization software is?
High level would be it allows you to really save on your hardware. So it allows us to have one piece of hardware server and run multiple servers under that one piece of hardware. And under the past domain, you had one server, physical server, one software. With the virtualization, you can have one physical piece of hardware and multiple servers running under that same appliance, so you get a savings of the hardware. That's sort of the buff or the high level of that.
And do we have this in place now?
We have VMware today, virtualization software that we use.
And it's provided by Nutanix?
No, VMware is its own product.
Okay, and so what?
Nutanix has the Acropolis, is what they call their virtualization piece, which they offer to clients who buy their appliance at no charge.
VMware is existing, and we're going to move to this new one.
Right, okay, yeah.
So
we have the hardware that's provided by Nutanix?
well, we don't today.
All right.
We wanted to buy. We have a HP SANS, Hewlett Packard SANS today that's aging, and we want to replace it before it breaks. It stores all our data. It's a big data storage. So this project for us was about data storage, not virtualization. That's why when Mr. Baldwin said, did you look at open source?
The item in general, that's probably worded too narrow. I mean, it's about the project. There are certainly open source storage options out there and open source other components that can be considered in the overall project.
And since it's been 15 days since I looked at the budget, the cost that we're considering to remove is how much?
60,000.
60?
Yes.
And a delay in funding this piece of hardware would do what? I mean, if we got a data storage issue now that or just one that we're trying to head off?
No, this is us being proactive. We want to replace it before we have to break and come to you with an emergency purchase because all our data is locked up and nobody can get to it. So we're not in a critical state today.
Okay. And so this item as it stands now is in the budget for $60,000. When did you anticipate making that purchase of that equipment?
Well, our goals, if the budget would have passed, we would have probably had requisition headed towards our purchasing department. Nutanix is on state price contract, so that was one of the reasons why we listed the product, because with $60,000, otherwise you have to do a bid.
Right,
So-
okay.
But it is on state price, so we would have purchased it. And
All right, so how long would it take to do a high-level analysis of open source?
I would definitely think our hope by, next month, we would be done with an evaluation.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you, Carl.
So I'll make a motion that we consider removal of funding for the virtualization software pending evaluation of open source options.
I second it.
Discussion? Okay, so it's just basically a delay, and we're just taking a chance that we don't need it beforehand, before we can get it done with somebody else or this one.
I guess, Carl, you addressed that, right, that you don't need the software immediately and that you do have time to take a look at open source?
The hardware, yes.
Or hardware, sorry.
I guess my question would be, maybe it's for David, if they remove funds today, and then we go to, well, then it's not a budgeted item, so I don't know. Freezing funds makes sense, or tabling until next month. Removing the funds, I'm not sure how that falls. Yeah, if the funds aren't there, then why research, because you just took my funds. There's not a project, right?
So what you're saying is that the motion is worded improperly, because if we remove the funding, that means we remove it from the budget, so there is no budget there for you to go out and seek a replacement. So really, the wording of the motion should have been something of the nature of, we not approve purchase until an open source high-level survey or whatever is taken in consideration and brought back.
Do we also need to put some language in there for any pending dollar adjustment for any changes in the software and the hardware? How specific do we need to be?
Yes.
You could just say remove and then come back with a new solution and then amend the budget for the new purchase price.
So it's fine like it is, we can just amend it later.
So just amend the budget later.
Yeah.
Okay, do we need to amend or change that motion or not?
Sounds like we're good.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
No.
Okay, we have one no, is that correct? Okay. So we have
That's correct.
4 yeas?
Yes.
Correct? Motion carries. Okay, here we are talking about scrap metals again. Doesn't seem like it's been a year. Consider award of bid invitation SM 71 for the sale and removal of scrap metals to the IRSA recycling. This always seems so strange to me, the way this works.
It is a little different than most bids in that they are bidding their deduction. And so all this scrap is generated just from the normal business of electric, water, and cable services, metals, lines we take down, stuff like that. And you're right, they are bidding what they're going to keep, basically. They're bidding their margin. That gets us better price. This also goes, they're bidding their margin against what the market is doing. So if the market is rising, we're getting better price. They're still getting the same margin, a little bit different margin, but same price. So I think it works out better for the plant board. But staff did prepare a bid. We sent it out to 10 vendors, received 4 bid responses. The bid is written on an all or none basis, and staff recommends awarding to ISA Recycling as they offer the lowest monetary deduction for each metals category. After deductions, it says here that FPB received $4,200, but we've received a check since then, so it's about $9,400 for the sale of scrap in the last fiscal year. I'd entertain any questions you might have.
I move that we award bid invitation SM71 for the sale and removal of scrap metals to ISA Recycling.
Second.
Discussion. If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. I think we already addressed number 9, so we're down to old new business.
Yes, and I have one item as new business. And what that is I was thinking about that we've just started our new fiscal year. And so I looked at roughly the population of Franklin County as our main ratepayers, our main customers, and what their economic position is. And I considered this in relationship to our new administration building. And looked at a few different areas using the U.S. Census Bureau information. Personal income for Franklin County is $37,875, which compares very closely with personal income for Kentucky. However, compared to the United States in general, that personal income is $46,049. So Kentucky is about, on average, 10% below that. I also looked at median household income, which is $46,818, and that was in 2014. So that would be combined more than personal income, combined with another person. A couple of other things that stood out is owner occupancy. So people owning their own home is about 62% here in Franklin County, with a median home value of $138,600. Education, 25 years old and older is high school diploma, about 86%. And college, some type of college degree is about 28% of the 25-year-olds and older. Poverty here in Franklin County is 13%, so living below the poverty level. And for the state of Kentucky, it's 19%. Those are the things that stood out. And I thought about that in conjunction with our new administration building at $16 million for 50 employees, and thought about where is a way that we could maybe conserve some money. And I ran across a letter of invitation to lease from the state government that they're looking for office space for about 24 employees, and this is actually for the Kentucky Wired Group that was in Fair Oaks and now is in temporary building area, or temporary housing. And so how the state system works is they send out a letter that's called an invitation to lease space. So they lay out what parameters that they're looking for, and I have a copy of that letter here. And it's a pretty general letter. It just says they're looking for space, 24 parking spaces, 6,110 square feet of office space. Figuring that our administration building was originally designed for about 67 employees, and we're now moving in with maybe 50. It would appear that we have extra space. One, I think, area of concern is the exercise portion, whether that's really necessary in light of our county ratepayers, and that this may be a way to reduce our costs of the new building and have someone from the state or this group from the state lease an area. So what is required at this point is that you send a letter, or get a letter to their office by 10:30 on this Friday, 10:30 in the morning, stating that you're interested in having them consider some of our space. Then they work on drawings and see if they could utilize the space, develop a plan, and come back to us and ask for a final and best offer on how much we would charge them rent if they use part of our space. So I thought it's something that the board should consider as a possibility for reducing the overall cost of the new building.
It strikes me as way premature.
Well,
We're still constructing.
well, that would
Fact of
make-
it is, we will probably be putting more people into that building in the future. There's a building across the street from us that Mount George Hilton is on, and maybe they ought to look at that. But
There's plenty of office space available. You've got the new tower that they're moving out of is going to be plenty of occupational space there.
Well, they have some requirements for lead construction, or near lead construction is one of the items. ADA guidelines, I'm not sure the tower meets that. Perhaps it does, but they're moving out of the tower
Also, they're
because,
abandoning the tower.
Yeah,
putting up
they're
surplus
selling it.
property, so they're not moving more state agencies into the tower.
right, in fact, it's up for sale.
Somebody's going to be moving into it.
Not the state.
what about the property we're vacating down at the Muni building? Maybe that's a possibility. But I just don't warm up to the idea of leasing out part of our new building. I don't even have the building completed yet.
Well, that would be the ideal time because it could be built out to the way a renter would like. Perhaps it raises the question as well as whether the plant board wants to continue to have a presence in downtown.
Well, don't try to put us on a guilt trip because we're moving our admin building, administration people out there. When all this started, we looked at a location in the county, and of course, that was not, that didn't go over very well, so we made the deal with the city, and the city offered us this land on Sauer, and said you can stay in the city now, and we said that's wonderful, we want to stay in the city. That doesn't mean we have to stay in downtown. There's lots of things that can stay in downtown and move into downtown, and I don't think that we should have any guilt complex because we're moving our crowded admin staff out into a more suitable facility, but we're still in the city.
But also when that project, first started years ago, they started considering other spaces, the plan was to move, all of the facilities and all of the personnel out there. And we've deviated considerably from that as we've built the Headend building. And additionally, the projections of what those costs to the community would be that I've heard from those original thoughts was around $9 million. And we're at this point considerably south of that already. And if we are going to continue to move additional folks out there, that's going to be tens of millions of dollars of additional cost to the community. And that's a significant impact to the bottom line for folks.
Very little of our staff has been moved to the head end. We had 7 out there, I think, and we're going to have 11 or something on that order. So that's not a material concern. Fact is, we need the admin building, we need the space, we need that land, so to get more of our service facilities out there in the future. Our service facility is falling down around their feet. Cable 10 building, that's what you've been out there. You get a feeling of claustrophobia in that place, and I just.
Then why would you consider utilizing, the 46,000 square feet building to replace 8,000 square feet better? Why wouldn't we already be considering moving the cable studio in, moving the cable telecom guys in, potentially offering offices for KyMEA or other
Well, I think
synergistic
in the
organizations
future,
like
these
Kentucky
things are going to
Wire.
happen in the future.
But, now's the time to think about those.
We can only do
We've
so
built-
much so soon.
We've
so
built this
fast.
space, we're building this space out now such that it's going to, accommodate, 900 square foot north of 900 square foot per employee. And if we're going to adjust that to more representative levels, then, now's the time to make those changes, not after we've already built it out to suit that space allocation.
I disagree. I think that we.
Well, it's certainly going to cost us more to change something we've already built.
We build what we're building, and it's bid out, and we're building it, and we're gonna need it. And it would be foolish to
We don't have any
try to
demonstrated,
back up.
we don't have any demonstrated need case. We did no needs analysis. There's no discussion of us actually needing the building.
I think we do.
Well,
Well, no, there was no research whatsoever done for needs analysis.
But one of the things Monique just talked about was that they're looking through the survey of how to automate more parts of customer service, which would mean fewer people as attrition happens.
And per the chart we just saw, over 50% of the current customer service workload is service start and stop activities. A significant part of that moves to
I'm not in
web-based and
favor of trying to
self-service.
turn back the clock and undo this project. It's needed. And in the
We
future.
don't know that it's needed. There was
we
never
will
a use
use
case.
it. We will use it.
Build it, they will come.
Well,
So
one thing
what is are you making a motion that we rent the place?
Well, we're still discussing, I think Rick was gonna say
I
something.
was just gonna say, you talk about square footage, and you try to associate that with the number of people that are there, but you never take in consideration that we're building a community room as part of that building that we don't have now, that will accommodate, I believe the last number was up to 100, or maybe a little bit more, that we're gonna make available to the community that is more easy access. It's gonna have ample parking for small organizations to have meetings, for them to have community events, because there's not a lot of space in the community now where you can have a medium-sized event. And now they're gonna be able to have that at the new administration building. So, that's something we can't do downtown.
And we feel like the benefit of being able to provide that community space offsets the $1 million in debt service that's directly impacting rates now to the community. And especially when there's other options for space like that. There's the library, there are other.
The library can't accommodate 100 people.
So then
And-
that responsibility immediately falls on us, and we
No,
feel like there's a
but we
period
are
of
a
benefit
community entity,
Sure.
and we're making this available.
The library is adding space, though, that'll be completed in about a year, which is meeting space is what they're adding.
Well, that's in about a year. I would hope that we would have our space available. There's a need for more than one space. I mean, as it is now, I know of several nonprofit organizations that have to go places that are expensive to be able to hold annual meetings or annual events because there's no space in town that can accommodate them to do that. So, the whole issue is that, in my opinion, you feel like previous boards erred in building this building. Y'all are not in favor of the building, so you want to do everything you can to create turmoil about the building. And, as the chairman said, we can't roll the clock back.
No, but we can make the best use of the research of the efforts we're already putting in place.
Well,
And,
that may be true, but we've got walls that have already been erected. So if you're talking about coming in now and redesigning it, that's going to delay completion. It's going to increase the cost, and I doubt that anybody is going to pay what it would cost to have the building reconfigured. They're going to find a cheaper cost per square footage to go occupy than having to spend the cost that it would cost to reconfigure the building as it is now. The building is designed so that in the future we can add space to that to bring all of our components together. And I'm sure you've seen those plans. I'm sure they were given to you when you came on the board. So you realize that of that, what was it, 30 acres that's out? No, is that?
30, yeah.
It's 30
something
acres, plenty of room there.
That we're gonna expand eventually, but it's not gonna happen
Expanding the
tomorrow.
whole complex, you're not.
Exactly.
There are no plans, and that's all additional cash outlay. I've not seen any plans for improving
No, we can only do so
utilization
much so soon.
of the
As
current-
far as
of the
our
current
ratepayers, our debt service, our cost in this ministry is going to be less than 1% of our revenue, less than 1%. David has scheduled out our debt service, and he's done a wonderful job for us. We're still A-rated, we're Standard & Poor's. We can handle this.
But is that really the question, whether we can afford the debt?
Well, it's part of it. You raised the issue.
It's certainly part of it, but surely that's not the
We
only
can certainly afford
consideration.
it. We're
that
doing it.
If we can't afford it, we should do it.
If you have a motion, make the motion.
Okay. I move that we consider offering our space to the state to see if they want to adopt any of it to their use. So in other words, putting together a letter to them to say, please consider our space when you're deciding what you'd like to do next.
Second.
Discussion.
We aren't committing at this point to, all we're doing is saying, come and look at the space, see if it would fit your needs, lay out what you think we might consider, and then we still have a decision to make after that.
Well, it presupposes that we want to do this or might do this, and I'm not that far.
Well, it's an opportunity to utilize the space, the meeting room that can hold 100 people. They would find that useful, I'm sure. It meets their requirements for a LEED certification, capable of a LEED certification building. It helps us utilize the space better than what appears we will be utilizing it at this time. It's a group working on similar projects that we're working on, Kentucky Wired, improving internet. It would have some very positive things.
I might also add that I have attended a couple of city commission work sessions in the past couple of months, and there have been numerous presentations by some entities in town that are actively looking for spaces to put state government into. And I think that we would be competing with those for-profit people that are looking to find real estate for state offices. And I think that might not be a good thing to do, to compete against our community for people that have vacant buildings now to put people in. I mean, I would like to see our downtown fill up some of these buildings that we have down here. So I think that's something else we could consider, that we would be competing with these folks that are trying to do that for profit.
Well, maybe on some level we would be competing, but we'd be also offering a cost benefit to the ratepayers, even the people paying state taxes.
So maybe we'll be competing with an individual landowner, but we would be providing benefit to the whole community by reducing our costs for operating our administration structure.
Well, I think it's premature. I'm not in favor of renting out part of our new building at this point. I think we'll call this by member. A vote yes is to pass the motion. A vote no is to not pass the motion. Would you-
Member Ludwig?
No.
Member Green?
No.
Member Petrowski?
No.
Member Baldwin?
Yes.
Member Rosen?
Yes.
The motion fails. Information item, general manager's comments.
No comments.
Nothing. Do we need a closed session?
No, sir.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Meeting is adjourned. Good meeting.